Airline Pilot Guy, episode 151.
Flight 209er, you are cleared for takeoff.
Roger.
LA departure 123.9.
Roger. Beat west connected.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy show, the view from my side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 714 in the Hilton Hotel in downtown Omaha, Nebraska. In today's episode, AirAsia 8501's black boxes have been recovered. A Sunwing flight lands short of a destination due to low fuel, not a destination, the destination. Passengers detained for opening emergency exits on a China Eastern flight, your feedback, and much more. So, get all settled in. Tray tables and seat backs in their upright and locked positions, electronic devices powered on. Flight 151 is ready for pushback. As the music fades, my corny music, which I like, fades off into the background. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy show. I'm Jeff Nielsen, Captain Jeff, the Airline Pilot Guy, and I'm here in my spacious professional recording studio, which is, of course, my hotel room in the Hilton Hotel. I believe it's a Hilton. It's one of those H hotels. I think it's a Hilton in downtown Omaha, Nebraska. And I think they must like Peyton Manning here, right? Doesn't he always use Omaha in his cadence for his snap count or whatever you call that? I digress, sorry. Football here in the United States, especially, we just had the National Football Championship game on Monday, which was today's Wednesday, so just a couple days ago, in which Oregon and Ohio State met, and Ohio State won the first playoff series national championship. I believe it's the first. And then, of course, we also have the National Football League playoffs going on right now, and they're getting close to the end, and of course the Super Bowl right around the corner. So why am I talking about that? I have no idea. So let me see, what should I say? It's Wednesday. It's a 4-day trip. Day 3. First day we ended up going to Boston, then back to no. What did we do that first day? Yeah. I think I went Atlanta to Boston, Atlanta, and Detroit. And then we laid over at the Westin Hotel in the terminal in Detroit. And then the next day, we went from Detroit to Boston. No, I think the first day I went to Baltimore. It doesn't matter, does it? But we went to Boston, Atlanta, and then Milwaukee. Got into Milwaukee the late afternoon yesterday. And let's see, we were at the Hilton Hotel in downtown Milwaukee. Very nice hotel. Very cold there. Didn't leave the hotel for obvious reasons. And today was an easy day. We just went from Milwaukee to Atlanta and then here to Omaha. And tomorrow, even easier, although it's going to be a very early day. The pickup time tomorrow morning is 4:40 because we have 4:30 because we have a 5:40 a.m. departure. But the good news is only one flight tomorrow. So that's nice. That will end my 4-day trip. And I think that's about it as far as getting you caught up on what has been going on. I was home for the weekend and again got a chance to spend some time with the family. And my daughter, Natalie, the dancer, had a recital or concert or performance or whatever you call it at her school, her high school. They call it the annual alumni dance. I guess they bring back some of the dance alumnists from the school, and they put on a nice performance. And I think she danced in about half of the little pieces there. So we did that on Friday night. And then Saturday and Sunday, just watched a lot of football and other things, but back out again on Monday. So now you're caught up. Let me move on to this.
Johnny, how much more coffee?
No thanks.
I love tea. I love the Java Jive and it loves me. Coffee and tea and the Java and me. A cup, a cup, a cup, a cup, a cup. Yes, it is the Airline Pilot Guy Coffee Fund commercial. If you'd like to help me with offsetting some of the costs of producing the show, you may contribute to the Coffee Fund. And you can find that at airlinepilotguy/coffee, airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. This is the Ink Spots singing the Java Jive, recorded in 1940. And since the last program, let's see, using the classic PayPal method, Rick Gorley, Fred Thompson, Andrew Johnson, and Elohim Serrano. And then via the Patreon method, my new patrons over there, Michael Barth and Patrick McCammond. So if you want to be part of the group that provides financial support to help me offset some of the cost of the servers, media, and web hosting, equipment purchases to try to make the show even better, a lot of room to improve, and also to provide me with some coffee, with some caffeine. Coffee is my favorite caffeine delivery system. So if you're interested in that and you have a couple spare dimes and quarters, you're welcome to contribute to the Coffee Fund if you have the resources to do so. If, however, you're a student, you're a young person, you're somebody who is saving up their money to take flying lessons, etc., please do not give me anything, because you need to spend your money on yourself and your education. Okay? I mean it. All right. That's enough of the Java Jive. Thank you, the Ink Spots. And now, let's move on to the news. Rather jarring music, wouldn't you say? Now, if you're already trying to go to sleep, I just started the show. I only started recording, 10 minutes ago, something like that? I can't read it, but not even 10 minutes ago. So come on, stay awake out there and listen. Okay, so the thing that is in the news the most, at least in my mind lately, is the crash of AirAsia 8501, the Airbus 320 crashing into the Java Sea. And let's get a little update here. According to the Aviation Herald, avherald.com, on January 11th, Indonesia's Ministry of Transport announced that one of the black boxes of Flight 8501 had been located about 30 to 32 meters below the sea surface. Divers attached a small marker buoy at the object identified as one of the black boxes of the aircraft. The next day, the Ministry of Transport announced that the black box discovered was recovered and has been identified as the Flight Data Recorder, the FDR. In the late evening of January 13th, AirAsia, that was yesterday, confirmed, citing Indonesia's Search and Rescue Agency and National Transportation Safety Committee, that both flight data and cockpit voice recorders have been recovered and have been transported to Jakarta for processing by Indonesia's NTSC. The cockpit voice recorder was found about 20 meters from the location where the flight data recorder had been recovered from. 48 bodies have been recovered so far, 36 of which have been identified. That was yesterday. Now, today, Indonesia's Search and Rescue Agency announced that a large portion of the aircraft, sized 30 by 10 by 3 meters with a wing still attached, has been discovered by Singaporean ship RSS Swift. The large part is located about 3,000 meters from the tail section of the aircraft and about 800 meters from the cockpit voice recorder. Due to current and visibility, divers have not been dispatched to the wreckage yet. Fishermen discovered and recovered 2 more bodies, bringing now the total to 50 bodies recovered so far. And that's as of Wednesday, the 14th of January 2015. So hopefully we'll hear some information about what they're finding or what they have found on the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder, and see if we can figure out the key to this mystery, to see why this airplane went down. Let's see. Arthur Loring via Facebook, I believe, sent this to me, a message. He said, "Hello, sir. This just happened. My question, how the heck can this happen in this day and age?" And he's referring to an article from globalnews.ca. And the headline is, Sunwing flight makes unexpected landing in Abbotsford. Abbotsford is in the province of British Columbia, not too far, about 40 to 60 nautical miles, I believe, from the Richmond International Airport, which serves Vancouver, CYVR. Is that right? CYVR? CYRV? CYVR, I think that's it. The article says, a flight from Mexico to Vancouver was forced to make an unexpected landing in Abbotsford Saturday night. A Sunwing plane ran low on fuel and landed at Abbotsford International Airport just after 9 p.m. After safely touching ground, the plane spent an hour sitting on the tarmac before making its way to Vancouver International. Let's see. The spokesperson, Janine Chapman from Sunwing, confirmed to Global News that Flight 262 made an unscheduled stop to refuel before continuing on to Vancouver. The spokesperson added that due to anticipated headwinds, 36 bags were removed from the plane to reduce the weight in an effort to alleviate excess fuel burn. And apparently they're still trying to find some of those pieces of luggage. One of the articles I read said that they were still in Mexico. Of course, this was a few days ago, so by now, hopefully, the passengers and their bags have been reunited. Reunited. Anyway, let's see. So people are wondering, what is going on here? You know, you make it all that way and you can't get to Vancouver. And is that common or uncommon? And I would say that it's uncommon, especially to get that close to your destination. And then, of course, there is a lot of the story we don't know. A lot of the story I don't know. There must be some details missing. Why the crew decided to make the decision to land that in just so short. I mean, just they were almost there. Maybe traffic conditions or weather in the Vancouver area necessitated the prudent move to land short and refuel just to make sure everybody would make it safely and soundly. I don't know. Was this a case of poor fuel planning? Perhaps. Were the headwinds that they had anticipated even higher than anticipated? I don't know. Too many pieces of the puzzle are missing here. But now it's not unusual. I fly from Atlanta to El Paso in the MD-80 series airplane, and in the wintertime when you have strong headwinds, it's not unusual. Was it El Paso or Tucson? Maybe Tucson. Yeah, that it's not unusual to have to stop somewhere on the way, let's say El Paso, to get some extra fuel, because again, it depends on your fuel burn and the winds, whether they're really turning out to be as strong or stronger than you had expected, etc. And so on those flights, you're kind of constantly keeping track. Well, you're always constantly keeping track of the fuel, but those flights in particular, even more so, because you know that there is a good possibility you might have to stop to take on some extra fuel and then continue the journey. And, that's why most airlines hopefully will consider this when they're making their schedules, and somebody will say, you know what, maybe that's not the right airplane to use on this flight that time of year. Let's put something that has a little bit better range on it, like an MD-90 or a 737 or something like that. But anyway, again, the people at Acme, they don't call me up and ask me questions about, Captain Jeff, what do you think? Which airplane should we use on this flight during this time of year? Nobody has called yet to ask me that. So we just do what we are tasked to do, and then if it's necessary, we stop and get extra fuel. And in the feedback section of today's show, one of our listeners poses a question or makes a book recommendation. Tom, my proto patron at Patreon, sends me a good book suggestion that is regarding a flight that, they didn't quite make it to their destination. They not landed short, but they ditched short of making it to their destination. And they talk a lot about fuel consumption and their routing from New York to Bermuda and then St. Martin, and the fact that it wasn't uncommon for the flights to occasionally have to stop at Bermuda based on the fuel burn and take on more fuel and then continue the journey. But they tried not to do that because it took longer. Obviously, it disrupted the schedule. It was an inconvenience for the passengers, and it was a greatly added expense for the airline because they had to pay fees to the airport in Bermuda, etc. But we can talk about that later. So I digress once again. So thank you, Arthur, for making us aware of the Sunwing flight that didn't quite make it to, it did make it to Vancouver. It just had to stop short and get some extra gas, fuel, and that petrol, and then continue. Okay, well, how many times have you heard me talk about these stories in China where the folks get a little impatient and frustrated and irate, etc., etc. And here we have another one. According to FoxNews.com, 25 passengers are detained after opening emergency exits on airplane. The latest in a growing number of air rage cases involving Chinese travelers happened in the early hours of Saturday morning in the southwestern city of Chengdu after the China Eastern flight was delayed by a snowstorm. Angry passengers complained about the delay and a lack of ventilation, and a man named Zhu opened 3 emergency exits to prevent the plane from taking off, forcing it to return to the gate. And a total of 25 passengers, all part of a single tour group, were held for questioning while the rest continued on to Beijing aboard a separate flight. Police said that Zhu and a tour guide named Li have been placed under a 15-day administrative detention for opening the doors and inciting passengers with false information. The plane's ventilation system had been turned off for 30 minutes during de-icing work to prevent fumes from entering the cabin, China Eastern maintenance engineer Zhu Yun told CCTV. Although the co-pilot had been dispatched to explain, passengers remained irate even after the plane left the gate. So, just so that you all know, and I'm sure that those of you listening to this show already know, that when we get de-iced, and I've done it, only one time so far in this trip, part of our procedure in securing the airplane and configuring the airplane for de-icing is to cut off the air supply. Normally it's coming from the auxiliary power unit, but it might be coming from the engines as well at that point. And the reason why we cut off the pneumatic air supply is that the de-icing fluid will be sucked up into the pneumatic air system, and then you'll smell that very strong, and some people would say possibly toxic, smell of the de-icing fluid or vaporized fumes from the de-icing fluid, which is not healthy. So we turn off the ventilation system. And then after we've de-iced, we wait for at least 1 minute before we turn the ventilation system back on to kind of allow the fumes to evaporate or lessen before we start pumping them into the passenger compartment of the airplane. So apparently they didn't do a good job of communicating this to the passengers, or maybe the passengers just didn't want to hear anything about it and decided to get upset about it. I don't know. But there you have it. More passenger misbehavior. And finally in the news, we're going to have a very short news segment so we can get on to the feedback section of the show. Terrafugia, or Fugia, I'm not sure the way they pronounce it. Terrafugia's roadable aircraft faces a weight hurdle. This is from Graham Warwick of Business Aviation Content from Aviation Week and Space Technology. The company has petitioned the FAA for a waiver of the gross weight and stall speed limits on the light sport aircraft category, LSA, arguing that the design's automotive crashworthiness features and ability to land and drive through bad weather will increase safety. Terrafugia is requesting permission for the two-seat transition to have a takeoff gross weight of 1,800 pounds and a stall speed of 54 knots, yet still be treated as an LSA that can be self-certified by the manufacturer against industry standards accepted by the FAA. LSA rules limit land planes to a maximum of 1,320 pounds and a stall speed of 45 knots. In 2010, to accommodate road safety features such as airbags, Terrafugia successfully petitioned the FAA to certify the transition with a gross weight of 1,430 pounds, so it was an extra 110 pounds, the limit for seaplane LSAs. And here's a quote from the CEO, Carl Dietrich. "We now have quite a bit more information about what it will actually take to meet the level of safety that we believe is appropriate for this type of vehicle, and it simply takes more weight than we were previously allowed. The transition was designed to be very simple to operate, in the spirit of the LSA rule. In my view, it would be silly and unfortunate to allow an arbitrary weight number associated with a category to inhibit meaningful improvements in safety and technological advancement." In other words, he doesn't want all this money they've been spending on this project to go down the tubes. I guess if you're not able to certify an airplane in the light sport aircraft category, then the costs for certification go up astronomically. So they're trying to keep it in that very, lower, very lower. What am I saying? That light sport aircraft category. And I don't blame them for trying to do that. Established in 2005 in a bid to revitalize general aviation by lowering the cost of aircraft ownership and pilot training, the LSA rule defines a simple low-performance aircraft that can be self-certified by the manufacturer, at significantly lower cost than Part 23 of the FAR's certification. Terrafugia states that even at a higher weight, the transition still belongs in the LSA category. It is easy to fly. It maintains a comfortable stall margin and benign stall characteristics, and embodies the original intent of LSA as a means to encourage innovation and growth in the aviation industry. Since 2010, the FAA has granted Icon aircraft an exemption to LSA rules to increase the maximum takeoff weight of its amphibious Icon A5 by 250 pounds to 1,680 pounds, to accommodate, among other features, a spin-resistant airframe design offering significant safety enhancements. So anyway, the article goes on to talk about the fact that they're petitioning the FAA. Hopefully, they're hoping that the FAA will allow them to have a little bit more weight and about 9 knots higher stall speed so that the Terrafugia transition will fit within that category. So that is the news for today's show, and now it is time. Let me turn the volume down a little bit. I don't want to shock anybody or stun anybody with this. So here we go.
Captain, incoming message.
Thank you. Okay, let's start with, speaking of the feedback bumper, let me find the pieces of feedback here that relate to that subject. And I'm trying to stall right now because I can't seem to, if I were smart, I would have tagged these and could have gone right to them, but I didn't. So let me see here. Oh, well, let's start with Bruce. He's the one that suggested that I change the feedback bumper. He says, "My wife Teresa really enjoyed the hard time you gave me for the feedback last week. She laughed for 5 minutes." So I talked her into recording a bumper to send you. Let us know if you like the idea, and we will take the time to record it right. Thanks, Jeff. Bruce. So let's hear what, this is just the rough draft of their suggestion for a new feedback bumper. Let's hear what Teresa and Bruce came up with.
Captain Jeff, you have messages.
Okay, kind of going with that Star Trek theme. Let's see. Well, I don't know. We're going to have to let the listeners decide, I think. Ray Williams, my neighbor to the north in Alpharetta, sent me some ideas to assuage Bruce's dislike of the incoming message. And so he gave me some elements that I might want to include in a new version of my feedback bumper. The first is this. Okay, that's the bugle call, mail call. Let's see. You may have heard this from a fantastic movie, one of my favorites.
Message for you, sir.
I think actually I've used that in previous shows. I don't know if it was the Airline Pilot Guy or Catholic Pilot, but I have used that sound clip before. That was, again, from the Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And I believe that was where that's from. And this one here. Okay, that is a cell call signal. So that's what Ray had to contribute to the search for a new feedback bumper. So what do you think? I don't know. Not convinced yet that that is better than what I already have, but it's a work in progress. So if you out there have any suggestions, let me know. So, excuse me, I need to have a cough button. Let's start today's feedback with Mark Labrowski. And he sent this to me, let's see, when did he send this to me? On the 5th, about a week and a half ago. This from I think the Daily Mail Online. Bangkok Airways cancels flight after fire lantern is sucked into engine as plane taxis to the gate. So he sent me a link to this article in the Daily Mail Online. A Bangkok Airways flight out of Chiang Mai Airport to Thailand's capital city was canceled after a fire alarm was sucked into the plane's engine. A number of lanterns were spotted in and around the airport as the Airbus A320 taxied to its stand, with one coming too close for comfort and getting stuck to the turbine fan. The plane was scheduled to return to Bangkok after landing in Chiang Mai on New Year's Day. The lantern was discovered in the fan turbine of the plane at Chiang Mai Airport, which is a city to the north of Bangkok in Thailand. The flight was canceled and the plane was later flown back to Bangkok without passengers for further testing. The incident has forced police in Thailand to clamp down on the popular custom of flying paper lanterns during celebrations, with a clampdown on all lanterns flying before 9 p.m. And so anyway, these flying lanterns, there's a picture here in the article. Beautiful. I mean, there's a really stunning photo of all these, must be hundreds or thousands of these flying lanterns or fire lanterns alighting, heading up into the air, into the atmosphere. Let's go fly a fire lantern. That's not it. So it's basically a big giant paper bag. Kind of reminds me of those bags that we use in the United States to put our leaves and grass clippings and that kind of thing in, and then we set out by the curbside for the yard waste people to pick it up every week. that you can find at Home Depot and Lowe's and Pike Nursery or whatever, store that you get your big yard waste bags. They kind of remind me of that, although I'm sure that they're probably lighter weight. But imagine that kind of a bag turned upside down, and then like must be some kind of a lightweight wire frame or circular wire frame at the bottom, holding the shape open in a circular fashion, and then a piece of that steel or whatever material wire going into the middle, and then holding some kind of a flammable object. And so I guess you light this flammable ring that's placed right smack dab in the middle at the bottom, and then the heat from the flame obviously heats the air. The hot air is captured within the envelope of this paper bag, and then of course you let go and the thing starts flying away. So kind of like a hot air balloon, like a miniature hot air balloon. And I guess that is quite common for these things to be sent up for various festivals, including New Year's Day. So thank you, Mark, for sending that. Nicholas, who sent me some audio feedback. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hi, Captain Jeff. My name is Nicholas, and I'm your neighbor up in Dahlonega.
Oh, hello.
40 minutes north of you. I have really enjoyed your show past year. I discovered your show early last year, and I've listened to all the episodes. I've actually also gone back and re-listened to some of the episodes because it's never get old.
Oh, thanks.
I'm not an aviation professional. I'm a college professor, actually. But I've always been interested in planes and the airline industry. And like you, I always look up when I hear a plane. Speaking of planes, I actually went to the Delta Flight Museum this weekend. And for your listeners who haven't gone to it, it's a wonderful place for aviation geeks. There was the 767-200, the very first that Delta received from Boeing. Its registration number is November 102 Delta Alpha. It's a very famous plane. And there were also a few cockpits on display. Unfortunately, the nose section of the L-1011 was closed. It was only available for groups. There was also a simulator of a Boeing 737-200 for rental. It cost $400 an hour. And it was really expensive. I didn't go for it. But it made me think, what do airlines do with simulators of the planes they retired? For example, when Acme retired the L-1011, the 727, and DC-9, what did they do with the simulators? Did Acme sell the simulators to airlines that had those planes? Did the simulators get parted out? Were they sold to private parties? I'm sure there are regulations against that. Or did Acme just keep them for nostalgia's sake? Thank you again, Captain Jeff, for making a wonderful show. I really enjoy it every time I work out or when I'm driving. And I hope you have a wonderful year. And I hope we'll have a meetup soon in the Atlanta area. I couldn't go to the last one. And I would like to suggest that we should meet at the Delta Flight Museum, which is the perfect place for us aviation geeks. Thank you again, Captain Jeff. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nicholas, a college professor listening. I think you're not the only college professor listening. Thank you, Nicholas. I look forward to meeting you sometime. And speaking of the Flight Museum, of which the company that you our sister company, Delta Airlines in Atlanta, and another meetup. Interestingly, have you and David McLeese been talking? Because he sent me this, and the subject of his email is ICYMI, which I have come to learn it means in case you missed it. And it's an image, a graphic that he sent to me, kind of, I think, I'm trying to make some kind of a suggestion here. The image is a very good-looking image, and it says, beer tasting and barbecue. Oh, you have my attention. I love barbecue, and I love beer. And it's an event held at the Delta Flight Museum on Saturday, February 28th from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. And the title of the event is Hops in the Hangar 2015. Sip Suds from more than 15 of Georgia's best craft breweries under the wing of a 767 jet and other historic aircraft. Savor barbecue provided by Low Country Catering. Win a free trip to one of America's best beer towns. It doesn't say which one. I wonder which beer town they're considering one of the best. I bet, Grand Rapids would definitely be one, right? Portland, Oregon. Seattle, perhaps? I don't know. Let's see. Georgia, Atlanta's a good beer town, by the way. Let's see. Enjoy live music by Atlanta's own Taste and Line Creek Bluegrass. Again, that's at the Delta Flight Museum on Saturday, February 28th, 7 to 10 p.m. Tickets, economy tickets are $35 in advance and $40 at the door, and first class tickets are $70 for advance purchase and $80 at the door. If you're a sober driver, only $20. And I'm not sure what the difference is between economy and first class here. Twice the cost. Maybe you get to taste more beer or something. Anyway, so maybe we can come up with something. Maybe another meetup at the beer tasting or barbecue. Now, I would imagine that if you are not of drinking age and you want to come to a airline pilot guy meetup, perhaps you would be considered a sober driver. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not saying that we're going to definitely do this, but it's a suggestion from Super Dave MC, so we'll have to see. So, Nicholas, regarding your question regarding where do simulators go after they are no longer needed, I don't know if I have the definitive answer, but I think that your feeling, your suspicion about what happens with them is pretty accurate. If the airline that owns the simulators no longer needs them, let's say they no longer fly that airplane, they can do a couple different things. They can sell them to a company that are still using that airplane and need those simulators for their training. They might actually hold on. I know that Acme has held on to simulators, even though, like for instance, the MD-11, we no longer fly the MD-11 in our fleet, but I think we still have, or we did have for some time, the MD-11 simulators in the simulator bays, and I think that we were contracting them out, or we were actually providing instruction and simulator time to companies that would come in and pay Acme for the simulator rental and simulator instruction. And sometimes they use the simulators and they bring in their own instructors. There are all kinds of different ways to do this. So that's another option. As parting out, I'm sure that that's something that happens as well when they get kind of old, and they may still have those types of simulators out there in use, and perhaps having a source of parts is a good thing. And as far as selling to private parties, I would imagine that perhaps there are some kind of security precautions regarding that, but I would bet there probably aren't. If you have enough money and a company is trying to offload a simulator, a full motion simulator, if you got a lot of cash in your pocket, I would imagine they'd probably let you have it, but I don't know that for sure. So maybe somebody out there with knowledge of simulators and where the old simulators go when they are let off into the sunset. I don't know. Maybe you can help answer Nicholas's question, but that's my best guess as well, Nicholas. So again, thank you for your feedback, and look forward to meeting you at a Airline Pilot Guy meetup sometime in the future in the Atlanta area. Now, Ray, again, my neighbor to the north, sent me an audio feedback file. So let's listen to Ray.
Hi, Captain Jeff. This is Ray Williams from Alpharetta. Happy New Year to you, sir, and to all the APG listeners. Anyway, Two things, an observation and a question. The observation is in APG 149, round about 1 hour, 11 minutes and 38 seconds in, you were talking about de-icing, and you came to the fourth option and you said...
The last thing they list here for ice protection systems are passive systems employing hydrophobic surfaces.
Now, given the relationship with hydrophobia and rabies, wouldn't this system be the ideal anti-icing for a mad dog? And now for my question. Occasionally, when listening to tower on a scanner, and I think I've seen it in a couple of Jeppesen charts, but when I look for them now, I can't locate the ones that I'm thinking of. I hear the term fly runway heading, and an example of this was in the crash of US Air 1016, when they decided to do a go-around. The tower controller says, US Air 1016, understand you're on the go, sir, fly runway heading, climb and maintain 3000. When they say fly runway heading, does the controller expect you just to carry on with that heading and neglect any kind of crosswind component, perhaps thinking along the lines, well, everybody flying there is equally affected by the crosswind and therefore you're all going to drift equally one way or the other? Or are you somehow meant to take the crosswind into effect and correct it to continue on the runway centerline? And if the latter, how do you go about estimating your crosswind component, and how would you continue on the runway centerline? Once again, look forward to hearing your answer there. Everything's always informative. Take care and good flying.
Okay, well, good question, Ray. Well, you're right. If they tell us to fly the runway heading, we don't make any kind of wind corrections at all because we're just flying a heading. And so if you have any kind of a crosswind blowing you left or right of track, well, then that's what happens. If they really need you to fly that runway track or a specific track, then they will either give you an updated heading based on their knowledge of what the wind is doing to the aircraft track, or they'll specifically say to track a certain course. Now, in the old days when we didn't have the area navigation, RNAV systems, we either had to kind of guess a good heading to maintain a specific track, or more commonly we would use some kind of a ground-based navigational aid like a radial, and a radial off of a VORTAC or a VOR, and then we would make the appropriate corrections. And there's real. I mean, I guess you could get into formulas and that kind of thing. You know, when we're talking about holding patterns, again, when you're using an airplane that doesn't have a flight management computer to make all these calculations for you, I do remember there was some kind of a formula where you could take, you know, the amount of crosswind that you have based on your speed and multiply by this and divide by this and come up with this, you know, approximate number of degrees of correction. But that little part of my brain, that memory section of my brain has completely dumped that data and has replaced it with some other probably trivial information. But, you know, we don't normally have to use a formula, whatever, to come up with a particular drift angle and that kind of thing. It's more of like, okay, I know the winds are blowing from the south. I'm heading west. I'm going to turn a little bit left of the course to maintain this track. And then if it looks like I'm still drifting off of that course, then I make another little correction to maintain that track. Now, if you have a system that allows you to track a VOR radial, you'll just, you know, click the button that says VOR track, and then you just, you know, follow the flight director commands, and it's a no-brainer. Same thing with area navigation, RNAV. If there's a specific track, and more of the departures and arrivals that we fly these days are RNAV departures and RNAV arrivals, that have specific tracks, and the system makes all these calculations for you and tells you exactly how to fly that track. If you're not hooked up with the autopilot, then you're using the flight director command bars, and they're telling you, what your heading should be to maintain this track. So I guess the big question you have is, what is, when they say runway heading, what does that mean? And it means exactly what you thought it did. It means just fly that magnetic heading that they've given you, and you don't make any corrections on your own for wind drift. And if they tell you to fly a track or a course, then depending on the technology in your airplane, you will utilize whatever methods or procedures that you have at your disposal to maintain that track. So I hope that answered your question. And let's move on to Brian. And he says, please. Oh, and this ties right in with Ray, who just sent that audio feedback. Brian had sent me some feedback a while back, and he was talking about the fact that he had lost a friend in an aircraft accident, and that he was kind of feeling mixed emotions about that and whether or not to continue to fly. And he saw what kind of impact that had on that person, his friend's family, and everything else. And he started thinking about, well, what about my family, and what are they thinking? What if I'm in an airplane crash? Blah blah blah. So I said a few words, but I also asked my listeners, my APG community listeners, to maybe help out and send some feedback to Brian. So this is Brian coming back to me now. He says, thanks, Captain Jeff. Please extend my sincerest gratitude to Ray and Captain Matt, and of course to you, for all of your feedback and words of encouragement. Sure enough, I think I just needed a couple of months to reflect and clear my head until I felt the desire to go flying again. Well, I woke up this morning, checked the weather, and said to myself, geez, today would be a great day to go flying. So I booked a Diamond DA-20 with my flying club, and up I went. I took myself on a beautiful tour of downtown Denver and along the foothills of the Rockies before returning for a few touch and goes to keep up my 90-day currency for carrying passengers. Seeing the snow-capped mountains from above and experiencing the freedom of flight was just what I needed to rekindle my desire to fly. And I'm already making arrangements to continue with my instrument training. I wanted to let you know how fortunate I feel to be part of the APG community, where I feel comfortable leaning on the experiences of you and your listeners to help get through tough times. You should be very proud of yourself and the community that you have built for all of us to take advantage of. Wishing you clear skies with the occasional Cat 3 approach, just to keep you proficient. Private Pilot Brian. Well, thank you, Private Pilot Brian, for your kind words, and thank you, Captain Matt and Ray Williams, for sending some helpful advice and feedback to Brian. And it's, as you said, Brian, it's so nice to have all of you out there listening and part of this APG community. And speaking of Cat 3 approaches, I did one the other day because I was running out of my Cat 3 currency, and the visibility was, the ceiling was very low, and the visibility was pretty low as well. In fact, when we were coming into Atlanta, this was the first day of the trip coming back from Baltimore, and we were looking at the weather thinking, it's not really improving. The visibility is still pretty low, and the ceiling was pretty much undefined. And I said, I need to get this currency anyway, and it's good practice, so why don't we just go ahead and plan on setting up for a Category 3 instrument approach. And so we did that, and as we made contact with the Atlanta Approach Control, the first thing they asked us was if we were capable of Category 2 or Category 3 approaches, and we said, yes, we are. And those airplanes, those flights out there that were not, either didn't have the training or the airplane was not configured to fly a Category 2 or Category 3 approach, they were out there holding somewhere until the runway visual range, the visibility increased to the point where they could fly a Category 1 approach. So we, for those out there who don't understand the differences between Category 1, Category 2, and Category 3, we use an instrument landing system, also known as ILS, that uses a localizer beam and an electronic beam for the localizer, which is the lateral track to the runway, straight off the runway, and a vertical track or a slope that you use to maintain a constant glide path down to the runway. And a Category 1 approach usually takes you down to somewhere near about a half a mile visibility, 1,800 RVR, and there are some circumstances where you can actually go a little bit lower than that with a Category 1. Category 2 usually brings you down to about 100 feet above the ground and has certain visibility requirements, lower visibility requirements than a Category 1. And then finally the Category 3, which is the lowest approach minimums that are available now, and that will bring you down, depending on the airplane and certification, to a point 50 feet above touchdown. For instance, the airplanes that I fly, or in some airplanes, will take you all the way down to the runway, and you really don't need to see anything. You know, almost completely blind approach. And so in that case, we always set it up for a coupled autopilot approach with auto land. So we did that, and we did that yesterday, or the first day of the trip, and yesterday we did another Category 3 approach into Atlanta because the visibility has just been yucky there, and that happens this time of year occasionally in Atlanta. So anyway, back to Brian. You're welcome, Brian, and thanks to all of you out there in the APG community for everything you do. I really do feel like this is a family, and I appreciate you all being there. Let's see, Brian, a different Brian. That first one was a B-R-Y-A-N, and this is B-R-I-A-N, Brian, in Seattle. He sent me some audio feedback. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hey, Captain Jeff, this is Brian in Seattle. Hey, I was just listening to episode number 148, and it's kind of funny because I literally just last night finished the book Forever Flying, the story of Bob Hoover. And if you don't want to wait for the movie to come out about Bob Hoover, definitely pick up this book because I can't give it a higher rating. It's awesome. Great book, great story, great first-class quality guy. And if you liked his quote about that he made at the awards banquet, he's got a whole bunch of other really smart things to say in the book. And just sounds like a great guy. I wish I could meet him. And I would love to try. But anyway, I like your podcast. You do a great job, and thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you, Brian. And speaking of Bob Hoover, the Bob Hoover Project, and the film, the video, Flying the Feathered Edge, I ordered it and received it actually a couple of weeks ago, but I just haven't had a chance yet to view the video. So it's out there. It has been released, and you can buy your own copy of it by heading over to thebobhooverproject.com. And I hope to be able to view that sometime soon, and then I'll give you my review of it. But in the meantime, the book that Brian in Seattle is talking about is Forever Flying, 50 Years of High-Flying Adventures from Barnstorming in Prop Planes to Dogfighting Germans to Testing Supersonic Jets, written by R.A. Bob Hoover, an autobiography. So that was released back in August of 1997. It's available on Amazon. Now, I do have an Amazon affiliation, and I think there may still be, I'm not sure, the new site, Arash. Are you listening? I think the news site has the little link, the little Amazon image there that you can click on, and if you do that, then it will register anything that you purchase to my affiliated Amazon account, and it doesn't cost you any more. So it's kind of a good deal for you because you're paying the same price anyway, but it helps support the Airline Pilot Guy show. So, and as soon as I can figure out exactly how to make a link or whatever that will give me credit for your purchase, I'll do that. But in the meantime, look in the show notes. You'll probably see something there, a link to this book, Forever Flying, if you want to check it out and purchase it. It looks like they have the paperback version. Doesn't look like they have a Kindle version of this book. But anyway, maybe I'll buy a copy of it and read it as well. So thank you for the book suggestion, Brian in Seattle. I do appreciate it. And thanks for your audio feedback. Daniel sent me, he's in Italy, a video on Vimeo.com, and it was about a helicopter flight test that went horribly wrong. A part of the rotor mechanism, the part that does something to do with the pitch of the rotor blades as they're rotating around. I think that's the part that failed. Anyway, they were test flying this helicopter, which is the first, I think they said in their video, the first and only monocoque, completely carbon plastic kind of shell, using 100% composite design, one-piece design helicopter, and they were out there testing it, and they had a bunch of GoPro cameras or some kind of video cameras, videotaping or video recording the event, and the thing crashed, and so you can ride along with them in this crash. It's pretty interesting and a great video, a high-definition video. So please check out the link in the show notes from Daniel. Thank you, Daniel, for sending that to the Airline Pilot Guy community. Let's see. Oh, Mark Van Ram, I believe in Virginia, sent me a link to a pretty cool story about a 3-year-old that went on to become a Blue Angel pilot. And so it shows some photos of this man as a boy with his, I believe, twin brother. That they went to an air show and they had their picture taken with one of the Blue Angels at the time, and you kind of are taken through his and his brother's story of how they both went through pilot training. I think they both became Navy or Marine pilots, and one of them actually became a Blue Angel pilot himself. So a pretty heartwarming story, really interesting. So I'll have a link to that in the show notes. Thank you, Mark Van Ram, for sharing that with us. Oh, you know what? I meant to talk about this in the news section, but that's okay. We'll talk about it now. Mark Labrowski sent me, and as well as many others of you, a link to this story about a United Airlines flight that showed up to an airplane, and during the pre-flight inspection, the first officer noticed on the tail section, on the bottom of the tail cone, where the APU is housed in the back of the 777, that there was some kind of a message that was, what would you say, etched into, not etched, but, well, there, the soot around that area of the airplane, apparently. You know how your car sometimes gets dirty, and then people will, take their finger and they'll write, "Clean me" or "Wash me" or whatever. That is what this looks like. It was kind of a dirty section of the tail cone, and somebody took something and wrote a message in the soot and cleared it away. And the message is "bye-bye," and then it has two faces, one that has kind of a smiley face and the other that looks more sinister. And so let me read a little bit of this article. This one happens to be from theblaze.com. A crew of 13 United Airlines workers is suing the airline after they were fired for insubordination for refusing to fly on a jet that contained an ominous message on the tail. The tail, it was a 747-400. Really? I thought it was a 777. Well, anyway, doesn't matter. The tail of the 747-400 aircraft bound for Hong Kong from San Francisco, I don't know what that noise is here, contained the words bye-bye, along with a frowning or devilish face, according to a court complaint. The crew cited a federal whistleblower law that prevents an airline from seeking punishment on its employees if they raise questions of safety or security. According to the attorney representing the crew that was fired, David Marshall said these flight attendants refused to let an airline bully them into flying because of what they believed correctly was a security threat. Despite the message, the pilot, mechanics, and security all attested that the plane was safe. Still, the flight attendant crew refused to fly, and the Trans-Pacific flight was delayed and eventually canceled. The workers were fired for insubordination on July 14th. According to United spokeswoman Kristen David, she told the Chicago Tribune, "Our flight operations, safety, and maintenance teams appropriately investigated and determined there was no credible security threat. The pilots, mechanics, and safety leaders deemed the aircraft entirely safe to fly." The employees, each with at least 18 years of experience, this was a wide-body international flight after all, allege in the court complaint that the airline refused to perform a security inspection on the plane and thus empty it of the more than 300 passengers on board. So I'm not sure what the latest is in regard to this firing, but several of you thought that that was something that I should talk about on the show. And all I can say about it is that after the concerns were brought up to the captain and the rest of the crew members, and after security and after the captain, co-pilot, flight crew, and maintenance took a look at everything and deemed the aircraft safe for flight, it was kind of, the onus was now on the flight attendant crew to fly the airplane. And it's their prerogative to refuse to fly, but they had to face the consequences. So I'm not so sure that I have any sympathy or empathy for them, unfortunately. Perhaps you thought I might, but maybe if I am aware of any other details in this, but it looks to me like it's just a kind of a prank thing. Somebody, to gain access to that area of the airplane would have required some kind of unusual equipment, like a cherry picker, some kind of a lift to get up there. More than likely it was some kind of a maintenance person that thought it would be kind of a funny prank or something. So I would not suspect a terrorist plot myself in this case. All right, moving on. Stuart sent me some audio feedback, so let's all hear from Stuart.
Hi, Captain Jeff. My name is Stuart Aslett, and I finally have some voice feedback for you. Well, just to let you know, I'm currently standing at Heathrow Airport, London, and it's a very cold, wet, damp day. It's completely overcast. I can just about make out the control tower from where I'm standing, which on a good day I can see perfectly, but today it's barely visible due to the mist and the murk. Anyway, my voice feedback which I'm leaving you is about in-flight medical emergencies. And perhaps one of your cabin crew listeners within the APG community might be able to join you and provide some feedback on this. I'm led to believe that it's common practice for most airlines to go equipped with two separate medical kits in the aircraft cabin. One which is a basic kit primarily for the cabin crew to use should they so need, and a second kit bag which is strictly controlled and only ever handed over to healthcare professionals that might just so happen to be on board, say for example a doctor or a nurse, or perhaps a paramedic like myself. I was wondering if this was the case at Acme. If so, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind just providing a very quick synopsis on the content of this secondary healthcare professional's kit bag. I'm also assuming that you are carrying an AED device on board just in case of a cardiac arrest, I'm sure that this is common practice for most airlines in this day and age. Whenever I take a flight as a passenger, my paramedic identification badge is always in my wallet, just like any other day of the week really. And I have to say that I would always offer my services to the cabin crew if a medical incident was taking place on board. Apparently, at some airlines, it's down to the captain's discretion whether or not the healthcare professional equipment may be accessed. And this is another reason I always carry my ID on any flight, just in case. Around 20 years ago, I learned of a service, a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service, which is available, or at least was available, to airline pilots over the communications radio, where it's possible to have a conference call with a nurse or a doctor to discuss and seek advice for any medical emergencies that were occurring at cruise altitude. Captain Jeff, I wanted to ask you if this was still the case and if you're aware of this service. And in all your years of service, have you, Captain Jeff, ever had any dealings with medical emergencies on board, such as having to make a diversion or an emergency landing, or liaising with a doctor who just so happened to be a passenger on the flight? Just interested to hear your thoughts, views and feedback on this. And for now, good day to you.
Well, thanks for your feedback, Stuart, in England, in the UK. Well, yes, we do have many different types of medical things that are on board an airplane, and our flight attendants are trained in the use of several of these items. Amongst them, AED, the automated external defibrillator. We do carry something called an Enhanced Emergency Medical Kit, an EEMK, a first aid kit, and there's another thing I think they call the red pouch. I'm not sure exactly what's in there. I think there's a biological kit with gloves and other things for them to wear for possible, to prevent contamination from highly contagious diseases, and, keep them from contacting any bodily fluids and that kind of thing. And we do utilize a service, I believe that's what you were referring to, called StatMD, and it's a contracted service that we use. And so if it's a serious medical emergency, when we are contacted by the flight attendants regarding the situation, we will call our dispatcher, and they will do a phone patch to StatMD. That's STAT -MD, and we get a medical professional on the other end of the phone patch to talk to. And if that's the case, we'll have the purser or the flight leader or whatever we're calling the head flight attendant, or whoever we're talking with. I don't think I'm using that word right. To fill out a, what do we call the form? A medical assistance form, which gives us information that we can pass on to StatMD: the name of the passenger, the age, sex, weight, general description of symptoms, physical signs such as hot, cold, clammy, dry, discolored skin, dilated pupils, etc., pulse, breathing status, blood pressure, temperature, the use of medications, pre-existing conditions such as asthma, diabetes, seizures, allergies, heart problems, if they've had a recent hospital stay, and that type of thing. And then they fill out that form and get as much information as they can. They pass it through the door to us, and then we pass that information on to StatMD. And then the decision is made between the medical professional at StatMD, our flight dispatcher, and of course the captain. They'll give us a recommendation as to whether this is something that's going to require an immediate diversion to the closest airport, or whether we continue with the flight and continuing to provide assistance. Now, in the information to the flight attendants, if they have a situation where a medical situation, they will call for help, inform the leader of the flight attendants immediately of all medical incidents. They'll inform other flight attendants so they can provide assistance. Then they notify us, the flight deck crew, and they use the flight or the medical assistance form and advise us of what they know. And again, here's the note. Stat MD should be consulted if the illness or injury is a serious or life-threatening illness or injury. If a medical diversion is being discussed, even if there is a medical volunteer on board, or at any time the crew feels medical assistance is needed, then gather the appropriate first aid equipment, retrieve the defibrillator, the enhanced emergency medical kit, red medical pouch, and or other medical equipment such as the first aid kit or portable oxygen as needed. And then you would hear them page for or call over the PA system a request for a medical volunteer, and then they'll explain the stat MD physician's role in medical diversion decisions. So in the case where we have a situation where a passenger is having some kind of a medical incident or scenario, we will page or ask if there are any medical personnel on board to assist the flight attendant with the situation. We will contact Stat MD to get their counsel and diversion advice. And in this case, the medical professional, the physician at Stat MD, will basically take precedence over, but will use information from any kind of medical professional on board. But the final decision rests not with the medical professional on board the airplane assisting the flight attendants with the medical scenario, but the preference to what the decision is going to be is based on the physician at Stat MD, unless he or she defers to the medical personnel on board and the captain and dispatcher to decide what to do. That's clear as mud, isn't it? Have I had a chance to experience a medical emergency in my 26 years of flying for Acme? And the answer is yes, just a handful, really. I've been very lucky. I have not had too many of these kind of things. One of the most stressful ones was it last year, about this time of year, when Atlanta was experiencing, and the Southeast was experiencing these terrible ice storms, and we were trying to get into Atlanta, and the runways were covered with ice, and we were flying in from, where were we flying in from? Well, it doesn't matter. But en route and during the descent and approach phase of our flight, we heard several of the airplanes ahead of us deciding not to give it a try to land on the runway that had just been cleared of snow and ice, and instead, because they were getting kind of bad braking action reports. So I have the 2 or 3 flights ahead of me who are diverting in front of me. And then about the same time, I'm advised that there's a passenger experiencing a medical problem. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, this kind of throws a little added complexity to the situation, because it's one thing when you have to decide whether or not to attempt a landing in a somewhat risky situation, as far as, not having the friction that you expect to have. And then, of course, hearing the 2 or 3 flights ahead of you diverting to various places, and then you're thinking, okay, well, should we do the same thing, or should we give this a try? And then you have the medical situation going on, and you're thinking, okay, well, we need to get on the ground as quickly as possible because this person needs medical assistance. And if you'll remember me talking about this incident last year, we looked at the appropriate required landing length charts and the braking action reports and everything else, and we decided that we had what was necessary for us to land. And we went ahead and did that, and it turns out that we had plenty of friction, and we turned off the runway at the normal high-speed exit that we usually do, and so it turned out to be a happy ending. And it turns out also in this case the emergency, or the medical emergency, was just somebody who was it wasn't that serious. It was somebody that I don't remember the exact details now, but it may have been more mental than physical. I've had situations where they've called up and said, we have somebody back here, and we consult with StatMD, and they say, where are you? I think we were coming from South Florida, heading up to Bradley International, and just north of Hartford, and we were approximately right above John F. Kennedy International, just about to start our descent. And I decided that by the time we could spiral down and land at John F. Kennedy, it would take about the same amount of time to continue to our original destination. And so that's what we did. We declared a medical emergency. We got priority handling and got vectors straight to the airport and landed, and the passenger received medical attention once we arrived there at Bradley International. The other time that I can think of just right off the top of my head was a case we were taxiing out at Baltimore Washington International, and right as we were about to apply takeoff power we had just been cleared for takeoff, we get this ding 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 ding, like this frantic chime coming from the back, and I always leave the interphone channel open on my interphone box so that I can hear what's going on in the back. In fact, that's usually the way I know that something is happening in the back of the airplane before they ever try to attempt contacting the flight deck, is that I hear them talking about whatever's happening in the back. Or I always also monitor the PA system, and when I hear the flight attendant paging for medical personnel, I'm thinking, uh-oh, and then usually the person I'm flying with goes, what? I said, I'm listening to the PA here and the interphone, and it sounds to me like they're having some kind of a medical situation in the back. Anyway, I heard them, or they contacted me and said, we need to stop, we need to go back to the gate. There's a passenger in here who's just getting extremely violently sick, projectile vomiting and everything else. So we quickly stopped the takeoff, and we were still in the low-speed realm, and told the control tower that we needed to return to the gate. And I did it very expeditiously, and told them to call the paramedics and have them waiting for us at the gate. And when we arrived at the gate, sure enough, they were there, and they came on board the airplane and went directly to the passenger. And at that point, the passenger was able to walk off the airplane, and it turns out, I guess, that this was a college student who had maybe overdid the drinking, over-imbibed a little bit the night before, or the day before, wasn't feeling 100%. Should not have been flying or attempting to fly on our flight. And but it wasn't anything more serious than that. But so I hope that answers some of your questions, Stuart. It's cool that you keep your medical badge and your qualifications with you in case you hear that inevitable. It's bound to happen one of these days, right, Stuart? Where they ask for somebody to help out, and I'm sure that they'll appreciate any help that you can lend in that situation. Okay, so hope that answered your question regarding emergency situations. Let's see, Andreas sent some audio feedback. Here we go.
Hi there, Captain Jeff. Andreas from Sweden here with some, well, perhaps not feedback, but more topic of discussion. In light of the recent drone discussion. Wait! Before you guys press skip on your listening devices, this is on topic. Well, kind of on topic anyway. I really would like your opinion, Jeff, anyways. And if anyone else has an opinion, that's great. Because this is something I believe really needs to be discussed everywhere. Discussed everywhere, not discussed. Oh, that's my English. Anyway, first off, for transparency's sake, I have a confession to make. I am one of these pesky drone pilots, which means that I sometimes slap a camera and a video transmitter on one of my radio-controlled aircraft and fly it around a local farmer's field. I also have a quadcopter that occasionally get the same treatment. And I also have a history in general aviation as a glider pilot. Now, I've been flying radio-controlled aircraft since the early 80s, and from that time to just a couple of years ago, you needed to have some prior knowledge about how an aircraft worked to fly. You needed to know how aerodynamics works and why things fly, etc. The people who engage in this sport, me, my friends and others, we had a general interest in aeroplanes, and with this came naturally the knowledge about airspace. Today, you can buy a ready-to-fly quadcopter with a minimum knowledge about flying, get up in the air and get the experience of flying like the birds. With this comes that these people don't necessarily have an interest for aviation and why things fly, and thus they do not have the notion of free and controlled airspace and all the other things that comes with a genuine interest in aviation. However, this does not make these people stupid or reckless, but they, as well as me, need to have some kind of framework from within that we still can have from within which we still can have this experience. And now we come to the core question that I believe is on topic. The discussion about drones has been so far: how do we fit them into the current system? Well, I believe we first have to ask ourselves, who does the air belong to? Is it the military? Is it the government? Or is it you and me and all the people in our respective country? If the answer is you and me and all the people in our respective country, then we have to make an effort to make it so and to make it safe. Because radio-controlled things with cameras on them is not going to go away. It's going to grow. It's going to be more and more and more. Because it's easier to do. If you read the forums on the internet for this, you quickly find that the reaction to banning or in other ways making this hobby inaccessible, for instance demanding a private pilot license, is: I don't care, I will fly anyway, try and catch me if you can. And this is not only sad, this is right out dangerous. So, how can we make this accessible and safe at the same time? Well, here's something to discuss. First off, there is nothing that is completely safe, and there is always the reckless people. In this hobby, as well as in general and commercial aviation, all the way up to the military flying. To different degrees, of course, but someone is going to make something stupid one time or another. Second, flying altitude. Because this is mostly, I think, about the altitude we fly on. So this is the FAA definition of minimum safe altitude. Number 1, anywhere. An altitude allowing a safe emergency landing without undue hazard to person or property on the ground. Number 2, over congested areas. An altitude of 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle within a horizontal distance of less than 2,000 feet. 3. Overpopulated areas. An altitude of 500 feet above ground level. 4. Over open water or sparsely populated areas. An altitude allowing for a liner distance greater than 500 feet from any person, vessel, vehicle or structure. And this is for all the manned aviation. This is the FAA definition. And we have just about the same rules in Sweden. And there is one thing from my glider days that always bugged me. And that is that number 1, that you have to keep an altitude allowing a safe emergency landing without undue hazard to persons or property on the ground, does not rhyme with number 2 and 3. Because there is no way, and I think all you pilots out there agree with me, that you can make a safe landing if your engine quits on you if you are at 500 feet above anything. There is no reaction time. Stick forward, nose down, keep up the speed and pray. That's just that's just about what you have time for. Heck, 1,000 feet AGL doesn't give you that much reaction time either, but it's a little bit more anyways. So get rid of 500 feet and just keep the 1,000 feet AGL or higher as the new minimum safe altitude anywhere. Set the highest altitude for RC flying at 700 feet AGL, and you now have a separation of 300 feet. Now, I know that this will stir up some feelings and questions, and some of you out there listening is just boiling with anger, but and questions and what will we do with surveillance like police helicopters, etc. Oh, well, in a few years, I for one believe that this work will be done with drones anyway, because they are cheaper, more environmental friendly, and one thing I think the general public would like most, they are quiet in comparison with a helicopter anyway. That leaves us with agricultural flying like crop dusting, and they fly under 500 feet AGL as it is now anyway. Cowboys. And number 3. So, what do we do with all these uneducated drone enthusiasts? Well, I believe that we can create an RC flying certificate. Not a drone certificate, but an RC plane certificate with different grades, just like a driver's license, with one of the grades being first-person view flying. Because, you know, a few episodes ago, there was this information out that the sightings of drones had increased rapidly, and I believe that this is the things that people see is not only drones, it's ordinary radio controlled aircrafts, and you have to make some kind of some kind of bucket where you place all these things, and I think that an RC flying certificate is the best way to get all these things within the same bucket. Now, the important thing here, to get back, the important thing here is to educate people, not trying to minimize the amount of flying or get rid of the hobby. Remember, this is not doable. People will keep flying regardless. Remember what I said about the forums before? I don't care, I will fly anyway, catch me if you can. Make it a course online with a test, a small fee, and you get a plastic card in the mail that you keep in your flight kit. Now, this is important from another perspective too. If you have a system with a certificate, you now have something that you can take away from people, and you can also prosecute the people who does the stupid things like flying too close to airports, in city centers, around skyscrapers, too close to people, over people's houses, etc. So, to summarize, I believe that you need to give people the framework from within which they can have this experience. We also need to educate people so they know about this framework. This means that we need to make it accessible. We also need to get the framework into the legal system so we can get the reckless people off the air. Well, there is only one question left: privacy. To some regard, this can be regulated in the framework that I talked about earlier. Don't fly over people, don't fly over houses, etc. Other than that, well, we live in a camera world today, as you know, and this is a general discussion, I think, that doesn't just belong in the flying camera world, but in day-to-day life. And I believe that this has more to do with common sense, respect for the people around us, and this starts with good parenting. Thanks for your patience, and don't forget the main question. Who does the air in your country belong to? Bye.
Thank you. Very well thought out arguments and ideas for how we integrate the drone flying world into all the other aspects of aviation and sharing this air together. And I agree with everything there, and including at the very end, where you mentioned, good parenting and common sense and having respect for others, etc. Unfortunately, we live in a world where some people don't get good parenting. They don't get taught proper ways to behave, whether it be in civility and manners, or if it be learning right from wrong. Teaching our kids morals and ethics and that kind of thing. So obviously way more than we can tackle on this program, but I agree with you, Andreas, completely. And I do believe that, making all of this accessible, and so that we can integrate all these different types of flying into our world of aviation is essential. And I'm hoping that that's what at least here in our country, in the United States, that the FAA is taking all of these things that you just mentioned into consideration. And, I'm not opposed to drones. I think that, as you mentioned, there are several wonderful things that we can use drones for, beneficial things, recreational things, etc. But we need to be able to educate people so that they understand what the restrictions are. Because, trust me, the people that I've talked to so far, the people that I know personally, who are starting into this world of drone flying, quadcopter flying, etc., are completely blown away when I mention, that the guidelines are that you shouldn't fly it any higher than 400 feet and this and that, and they look at me like I'm from outer space. What? I didn't know that. Because how would they know that? We need to have some kind of a system where people have at least a rudimentary level of education when it comes to the rules of the road, so to speak, as far as how to, where to operate these things and where not to operate these things. As long as you keep them away from, airports, controlled airports especially, and away from the world of aviation that I am involved with, then I'll be happy. And then, of course, we're not even talking about the concerns about, as you mentioned, we live in this camera world where everybody carries a camera with them in their phones or whatever, and the fact that we live in a surveillance society and, privacy concerns and that kind of thing, that's, again, a completely different thing to talk about regarding drones, etc. So, and I'm not going to tackle that on this show, that's for sure. So a lot of great things to chew on, and I invite everybody who listened to Andreas to consider what he said and to maybe contribute to this discussion about how we make all this work. And you're right, Andreas, these things are not going away, and we need to figure out a way so that everybody can just get along. Can't we all just get along? Again, thank you, Andreas, for your thoughtful feedback. And I'm touching the screen of my laptop computer as if it's a touch screen. It's not. Here, let me use my cursor. There we go. This is from, Swedish Jim. So we just had Andreas from Sweden. Now we have Jim from Sweden. He says, "Hi, Jeff. Just got back from beautiful Tromsø in northern Norway, taking photos of the northern lights, Polaris Borealis. I also got to go on a whale safari, and I got to see a whole lot of humpback whales." So what's this got to do with aviation, you might say? Well, being in a cockpit on a clear, dark night must put you in the front row for the wonderful northern lights. Have you ever seen it? If so, how was it like? Also, about pitot tubes, are they... Well, first, let me answer the question about the the northern lights. The Aurora Borealis, is that right? I think that's right. I have only seen them in my previous life of flying when I was a C-141 pilot in the Air Force, because that is when I was flying in the northern latitudes, and that's where you get the most striking displays when you're above a certain parallel. I'm not sure which. I think it depends on the time of year and the magnetic disturbances and all that kind of stuff. But I do remember seeing them mostly when I was flying over the Alaska area and in the middle of the night, and seeing the northern lights is just spectacular. Now, speaking of spectacular, this photo that Swedish Jim included in his feedback, I think I'll probably either use this for the episode graphic, or perhaps I'll include it in the show notes for you to look at. But it's just absolutely beautiful. And in this case, I don't know if it's because you're using some type of a filter, or if this is the way it actually appeared when you were in Norway, but the lights are all green, kind of like this fluorescent green color. When I saw it, it was more multicolored, a lot of white light, and then a lot of yellow and blue and reds. I'm trying to recall this. It was probably back in the early to mid 80s, and a long time ago, especially for my memory bank. But I do remember that it was almost disorienting, because when you looked at it, it almost gave me that feeling of dizziness, like I was on some type of tall pole or tower, and teetering and feeling like I was going to fall. I don't know. It just kind of gave me that sort of feeling when I looked at it. But it's just spectacular. So that I've seen them a few times, but yeah, amazing to see it in the cockpit. So he continues about pitot tubes. Are they always heated? If not, why would you turn off the heat on them? You don't want to turn the heat off on the pitot tubes unless you're on the ground. So that is usually a part of the flow pattern for after you land or when you're shutting down, to turn off the pitot-static system. Otherwise, one of the first things that we do when we arrive at the jet for the first flight of the day is to turn on the pitot-static system to get those heaters going, and they stay on all day long until the end of the day, the shutdown checklist, and then they go off. Yeah, really no reason to turn them off. And finally, about what you talked about a couple of shows ago regarding steering columns, don't remember the correct word for it, being physically linked together on Boeing airliners, control yoke. What would happen if both pilots fought of the control in opposite directions, and would it break according to design? Yes, it would. If the co-pilot was turning the control yoke one way and I was turning it the other way, after a considerable amount of force, the two would separate. And it depends on the airplane, the way it's designed. On the airplane that I fly, you'd kind of both have control. I mean, the right yoke would be controlling cables that are going to certain control surfaces, and the left control yoke, the one that I would have access to, would be utilizing cables that would be going to other control surfaces. So I'm not really sure exactly what would happen in that case. It's not like one or the other gets control, at least in the Mad Dog. It would be an interesting situation, to say the least, and I can't imagine why this would happen unless you had somebody just going berserk. And in this case, I would do my best to incapacitate that person and so that I could have complete control of the airplane. So Jim goes on, do you think that the captain's column would get the control? It sounds most logical. Maybe some mechanic has an answer to this. Yeah, maybe somebody does. If you're a mechanic out there, you know the answer. Maybe you know the answer for the airplane that you work on or qualified on, but that's about the best I can do, Jim, for that question. And he ends with, anyway, thanks for a great show. You're constantly making me look forward to the next show. Tailwinds and beautiful weather, Swedish Jim. Well, thank you, Swedish Jim. And I look forward to hearing from all of you, my fellow members of the APG community. Thanks for everything you all do. Tillman writes, here's some feedback, voice feedback to the discussion about real flying versus simulator training from episode 149. Okay, and then he also included some YouTube links of actual flight training in heavy metal. One is an A380 touch and go at Karlsruhe Airport, and another a Swiss A340 pilot training flights. And Tillman is Private Pilot Tillman from Berlin, Germany. And so let's hear what he has to say.
Hello, Captain Jeff. This is Private Pilot Tillman calling from stormy Berlin, Germany, with some voice feedback on your discussion about simulator flying versus real flying from episode 149. If I understand the European regulations correctly, the so-called zero flight time type rating is only possible with a minimum of 1,500 flight hours on jets with more than 10 tons and more than 19 seats. So that pretty much excludes everybody coming from an ab initio training. But still, I think there must be more, because I have seen many airlines doing touch and goes with very heavy metal. I'll include a link to a YouTube video of a Lufthansa A380 Super Jumbo doing touch and goes in the Karlsruhe airport. Now, the quality of the video is not great, but it's pretty spectacular to see the big bird do the touch and goes. And I assume that Lufthansa will not train pilots with less than 1,500 hours on the A380, and I don't think they do the touch and goes with that big bird just for fun. So there must be another legal requirement for a number of actual landings before a pilot can enter commercial service. By the way, when Lufthansa first received their A380s in Germany, they did combine the flight training with a promotional tour. So they flew from city to city, and on each of the approaches, a different pilot would take controls, and on the ground, all the plane spotters would be waiting for the new big aircraft and take pictures, me included. I also found a second video of Swiss Airlines pilot training. That's actually a promotional video, and they take an A340 and fly it from Zurich to a not so busy airport somewhere in Germany, and then do touch and goes all day long with different pilots. And I think they mentioned something like 50 landings in one day on the A340 in this video, so that's a pretty intense training. Anyway, Captain Jeff, thanks again for the great podcast. Take care, and always remember to keep the blue side up.
I will remember that. Thank you, Tillman from Berlin. Thanks for your great feedback. And those links, of which he talked about, are going to be in the show notes, so look for them there. Thank you, Tillman. Tim Van Ram, let's see, sent me this. It was from a bird strike at the Sacramento airport. He says, by the way, the Sacramento airport is smack dab in the middle of a migratory bird flight route, and when driving past, you can see thousands of birds and one or two commercial jets. He says, I'm sure the birds were there first. Well, that's true. Let's see, a United 737 taking off from Sacramento on its way to Denver was forced to make an emergency landing early Friday after a bird strike on one of its engines, authorities said. That was back on last week, I guess, last Friday. According to officials, the jet, Flight 1596, took off at 5:44 a.m. and struck the bird or birds about 7 miles from the Sacramento International Airport, which is kind of unusual. I think that it would still be dark that time of morning, and for the most part, I believe birds don't fly in the dark. I could be wrong, but I don't believe most species do of birds. Anywho, back to the article. The flight crew immediately declared an emergency and circled to return to the airport. Passengers reported seeing sparks coming out of an engine. The plane made a safe emergency landing at about 6:20 a.m. Maybe it was just starting to get light. The plane, while many of the passengers were shaken by the incident, there were no immediate reports of injuries. KCRA meteorologist Eileen Javora was on the plane. She told her station that she heard a couple of booms and then smelled smoke. I was on the side that saw the glow and the booming of the engine being on fire. The plane never lost altitude and never dipped. The plane never jerked. She said once people realized what happened, passengers started saying that they were seeing flames out of that side, and that's when she saw a flight attendant running down the aisle with a fire extinguisher. Huh? Okay. After the second or third time third boom. It was pretty intense, she said. The guy next to me just shut the window, and I just covered him. Another passenger said passengers began to panic as they watched the flames coming out of the engine. Everyone in the cabin was yelling, "Fire, fire!" Another told reporters she thought that the plane might go down. I was thinking, this could be it. She said, "I thought my daughter is not ready to lose me." Well, I have news for you. Your daughter's ready. No, I'm just kidding. I think the funniest thing about this article, Tim, sorry, your brother is Mark, that the flight attendant was running down the aisle with a fire extinguisher. Perhaps she didn't realize that the fire was outside of the airplane, not inside. Oh, well, sounds like a job well done by that crew. And thanks for the feedback, Tim. Dan, let's see. Nope, Dan writes about that 13 flight attendants that refused to fly and being fired. So I'll move on. Let's see. Tom, our private pilot guy, sent me some audio feedback. Let's hear what Tom has to say.
Hi, Captain Jeff. It's Captain Tom. Thank you for all the recent episodes that you put out. Hope you had a good holiday, great New Year. I'm sending in this feedback today because I just listened to episode 150, where in there you talked about the 747 that landed recently with a missing landing gear that was stuck not in the down, not in the up, but basically useless. And by coincidence, I just finished listening to the audiobook 747, Creating the World's First Jumbo Jet and Other Adventures from a Life in Aviation. I downloaded that from Audible. It's available in hardcover, Kindle, paperback, all the formats as well. But what a coincidence that this just happened to happen where the 747 landed with a missing gear, and I finished this book. And in the book, by the way, it's written by Joe Sutter, who pretty much oversaw that program from creation through flight test through delivery to the initial customer, Pan Am. And in that book, he talks about the redundancies that they built into the 747 and how it was really one of the first jetliners where redundancy was taken to the next level. And a lot of people gave him a lot of heartache about that. But he talks in the book about the different stories where that redundancy surely paid off. And I think that it did in this most recent incident, accident, occurrence, whatever you want to call it, with the 747 landing with a missing landing gear. So that's a great book. I thought you and your listeners may enjoy that. It's called 747, Creating the World's First Jumbo Jet and Other Adventures from a Life in Aviation by Joe Sutter, easily found in Amazon. Thanks, Captain Jeff. Good day.
Another book recommendation. Wow, this show is full of them. I really need to do something about making sure that when you click on those links that, it gives me my affiliate status or whatever. Don't worry about it. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Thank you, Captain Tom Wojciechowski, founder and show host of the Private Jet Podcast, conversations that reduce risk and increase value in business and private aviation. And he puts on a fantastic podcast. He's also an occasional guest with Carl Valeri and the Aviation Careers podcast. So he's kind of the expert in corporate aviation. So check it out. Thank you, Captain Tom. And yes, maybe I will be in the Flint, Michigan area sometime next month. I haven't looked. I think I just received a note that my February schedule has been awarded. I just haven't looked at it yet to see whether or not I have a layover there. But if I do, I'll get in touch. So thanks again, Captain Tom. Hopefully that wasn't confidential information I just divulged. But anyway, I will move on to Nick Carson. Nick writes, I have a question for you about KLM's A330-300 tail number. The fleet of KLM's A330-300s starts with PH-AKA, AKB, and then it skips to AKD, AKE, and AKF. So I was wondering if you had any ideas why Airbus and or KLM would skip Papa Hotel Alpha Kilo Charlie. So I did a Google search for PH-AKC, and immediately found this entry in the ASN Aviation Safety Network Aircraft Accident Database. And this was a Koolhoven FK-43, tail number PH-AKC, which had an accident, crashed on the 17th of December, 1937. I went, really? Okay, so I did a little bit more research. I guess this was a very small little airplane, 4-place airplane, single-engine, propeller-driven airplane, owned and operated by KLM, Royal Dutch Airlines. Again, that was a Koolhoven, Koolhoven FK-43. And I guess they were doing some training, and it crashed during a tight turn, stalled after takeoff. And then I thought, well, that doesn't seem like it would be the reason that they wouldn't be using this tail number. So I looked and found a discussion in one of the aviation forums, and the person said something about, will PH-AKC be skipped because of this ancient accident? Remember, that was 1937, long time ago. And the person who answered said, no, KLM could not claim PH-AKC because it has been used within the last 30 years. A Dutch rule prohibits reuse within 30 years. Back in 2006, KLM registered PH-AKA to PH-AKZ range for future use on Airbus's equipment, and the request was granted with the exception of Alpha Kilo Charlie, Alpha Kilo Juliet, and Alpha Kilo Tango. Again, it just has to do with the fact that those three that I just mentioned have been used within the last 30 years, so that's why they couldn't use them. A Dutch law or rule. So, good question, Nick. It caused me to do some research and try to figure it out myself, so hopefully that was a good answer for you. And, he also writes, how powerful does the APU have to be for an airplane? What about the MD-88, MD-90? Does engine startup take longer for the air start unit to start up an engine on the Mad Dog than from the APU? Sorry if these are too technical for you. Thanks. I'm not sure. No, they're not too technical. I can tell you from anecdotal evidence that the auxiliary power unit that we carry along with us, the APU, always, or 99% of the time that I've experienced it, starts up the engines much better, much faster than an air start unit on the ground. Occasionally, now I said almost because occasionally we'll get like a really super powered air start unit, or a huffer we call it, that really is designed for bigger airplanes and bigger engines, and sometimes those things really spin up our engines very quickly, faster than our auxiliary power unit can. But in most cases, the ASU, the air start unit, the huffer, is anemic compared with the APU. And then sometimes, in some circumstances, the air start unit is so bad that you can't really start the engine, and then the ground crew has to go find another one. I've had that happen many times, unfortunately. So, yeah, in most cases, Nick, the APU does a great job starting the engines, and that's what we use 99% of the time. Let's see, Travis writes in, he says, something for your show, a very good video about the first Air Force One. Now, I talked about Columbine 2 and the story about it being used with President Eisenhower and the fact that it was involved in a near collision with an Eastern flight, same number, but the Eastern flight and the Air Force flight were in the vicinity, and somehow they almost hit each other. And so they decided from that point on that when the president was being carried in an airplane, the call sign would be Air Force One. So there would be no confusion about the important status of the airplane. And of course, this was a Lockheed Electra or a Super Electra or whatever, Columbine 2, and the story of the guy that bought a bunch of these things for a crop dusting operation and whatever. It's all in that YouTube video that we're going to have a link to in the show notes. So look for the first Air Force One YouTube in the show notes. Thank you, Travis. And Travis sent me this audio feedback. Perhaps I should have played that before I talked about the video. And well, here, what did you have to say, Travis?
Hi, it's Travis from Australia again. Just watched a documentary called The Airbus, the Airline Profile History of the Models. And one thing that was brought to my attention was why Airbus actually developed the A340 with 4 engines. It turns out that the height of the tail on the A340 could be reduced, which decreased the amount of drag. The reason this could happen is if one engine failed on a 4-engine aircraft, the yaw effect is always less than what it would be on the A330 2 engines, as if one engine fails there, all the pressure from the engines is pushed from one side. This meant that the fuel efficiency of the A340 was enhanced over the A330. The A340 was actually one of the most fuel efficient aircraft ever developed, but with the maintenance cost of 4 engines over 2 engines, then meant the running cost was increased, depending on fuel prices. On this documentary, it actually shows that the A340 flew all the way from Paris to Auckland, travelling right around the world in under 48 hours. This record I don't think has been beaten. As fuel prices increase, the A340 actually becomes more efficient than the A330, as less fuel is used for the same journey. But with maintenance costs on 4 engines, it has to be quite an increase in fuel to make this worthwhile. As I have heard you discuss this in the past, I hope this has been quite helpful to your program, and look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Well, thank you, Travis, for the audio feedback and the information about the A340 and your good link to the first Air Force One. And I wish you had mentioned the name of the documentary about which you were speaking regarding the A340 and the A330 and the fuel efficiency and all that kind of stuff. That would have been interesting to watch. I'm assuming that it's available online somewhere, but perhaps not. So if you get that information, please send it to me. Thanks. I think our community would like to watch it as well. Let's see. This from Bhavesh. And he is from, I believe he's from Kenya, North Africa. He says, I had intended to make this an audio feedback, but I don't think the wife will appreciate me talking to myself at 3 a.m. I am jet-lagged. I'd mentioned about my pilgrimage to SEA, Seattle. Here I am. So he's in the States in Seattle, Washington. The States is a long, long way from home. It will take a minimum of 24 hours to get here if you don't own a Boeing business jet. There is a time difference of 11 hours from home. This is my 5th day here, and the body clock is still trying to align itself. I flew via London. It was supposed to be Paris, but the aircraft diverted to London as Paris was fogged in, and then from there to San Francisco. We spent 3 nights there. We got into Seattle last evening. San Francisco is much warmer than here, and hillier. It looks somewhat familiar because of Hollywood movies. I've watched some Nicolas Cage movies shot there when he was chasing some baddies in a Ferrari, I think. And there is Escape from Alcatraz and various shows based on Alcatraz. The people there are a lot more into fitness than I'd expected. I apologize, but I expected every one of you to be over 100 kilograms with a waistline of 44. The food portions here are big, and you guys use a lot of coins. We don't use coins much, thus their use is a bit of a challenge. Coins here don't have their value written in digits. It says it's a dime or a quarter cent. I shouldn't have to Google to know what a dime is. If worn out, one can't make out what it says, which makes you look like a donkey when trying to pay for coffee. So I just hold out my hand with all the money I got and ask the cashier to pick what she needs. I hope these are honest people. Separately, I love the massive 4x4 trucks here. Awesome. They make the earth a warmer place. No, I make the earth a warmer place every time I put the start lever to idle, so I have no moral high ground here. Sorry, I know this is an aviation podcast. I digress. They say the world is getting smaller. The beautifully engineered planes and Airbuses we fly make this happen. After all these years of flying, I still get amazed at how you can sit in a tube for a few hours and you pop out on the other side of the world that is so different from yours, yet so similar. It gives me goosebumps thinking of this wizardry. I've attached a photo out of the left window as we descended into Seattle on an Acme E-175. Many thanks, Captain Jeff. Thanks for the amazing podcast, Babesh. And thank you, Babesh. He says, P.S. Once I find a post office, the coffee will be on its way. He's going to send me some Kenyan coffee, I believe. I hope you like the flavor. It tastes quite different from what you get here. We find your coffee bitter and more acidic. I'm sorry, but I've heard a lot of people say that from Europe and Africa, that our style here in the States is a little bit more bitter and acidic. Although I do like a well-rounded, full-bodied coffee, not necessarily acidic and bitter. And the picture that he sends here, I looked at it, and it looks like ice crystals, and then it looks like something. I actually had to send Babesh a reply saying, what am I looking at here? And he said, it's the picture out the window of the winglet of this Embraer 175. So, I think I know what the problem is. The program that I'm looking at it in automatically turned it clockwise 90 degrees, but it shouldn't be. It should be turned 90 degrees counterclockwise for me to look at it properly. So if I cock my head just right, okay, now I see. Thank you, Babesh. I'll put his picture in the show notes so you guys can look at it as well. Let's see. We already talked about that. Oh, did you hear about this? Everybody was talking about it. A British Airways 777 plane blown across the Atlantic at supersonic speeds by the freak jet stream. And there's a link to the article. But basically, a British Airways 777 got into the core of the jet stream over the Atlantic, and I guess they were getting some winds that are in excess of 200 knots. And the ground speed was registering at 700 and something. And so whoever wrote the article somehow believes that the speed of sound and ground speed have some kind of correlation. And all I can tell you, writer of that article, is that the only correlation between the speed of sound and ground speed, at least the only correlation that makes any difference, is when they're trying to set those speed records, those ground speed records out there in the Bonneville Flats, out there to the west of Salt Lake City, on those very, very fast cars that are usually rocket propelled, and they try to break the speed of sound on the ground. Well, that's a case where the ground speed and the speed of sound going through the air are pretty much the same. But in airplanes flying, the ground speed really has nothing to do with the speed of sound, because the speed of sound is the speed that the airplane is actually moving through the air. So let's see. Let's think of something to help you understand this. I think most of you do, but just in case. You know those moving sidewalks in the airports? Okay, when you're walking along, if you're walking at 2 miles per hour, or let's say 4 miles per hour on the moving sidewalk, and the moving sidewalk is moving at 3 miles per hour, well, your ground speed is 7. Because the thing on which you're walking is already moving a certain speed. So, you know, I guess my whole point here is that, yeah, you get into a really good jet stream core and your airplane goes fast. But it has nothing to do with the speed of sound. Okay? All right. Sport Pilot Dave just sent me a very short feedback. Understanding Air France 447. Disturbing. That is the book, by the way, of which I was speaking and somebody else was referring to earlier. And in fact, they asked about it, I think, and I didn't answer. I think Tom was asking. Yeah, Tom, it'll be in the show notes. The book that I'm talking about, Understanding Air France 447, written by Bill Palmer. No, that doesn't sound right. Is that right? Bob Palmer? Bill Palmer? Yeah, it's in the show notes. And it recounts the Air France 447 accident and the investigation and goes into a lot of detail. A very good book. And by the way, Tom, I also, based on your suggestion, bought and downloaded the Kindle version of that book, 35 Miles from Shore, or whatever it was called, that DC-9 that crashed short of St. Martin. And I'm already on chapter 15, so it's a very, very well-written book. I agree. I guess I didn't ever say anything about that after your feedback, Tom. Sorry about that. But I remembered now. So again, Understanding Air France 447. And here, let me see if I wrote that down somewhere. No. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I haven't gotten to Tom's feedback yet. No, I haven't. That's why I didn't say anything. Oh, I'm so discombobulated here. Yeah, Bill Palmer is the author of Air France 447. But anyway, yes, I agree. Sport pilot David, that it is disturbing for sure. Okay, let me see if I can get this train back on the tracks. Craig writes, I hope you had a great and wonderful holiday season. I hope you did as well, Craig. I attached a video of an Acme Mad Dog approach and landing at KBWI, Baltimore Washington International, this past week that I recorded. Feel free to share with the APG community. Okay, I will. I'll have a link to it. Also wanted to update you that I have completed and passed both the I'm looking over here at applause. See if I can find that. Where is it? I need an assistant to help me with this stuff. Okay, well anyway, wanted to update you that I have completed and passed both the FIA and FOI and will be taking the FII within a week or so. Also, I'm hoping to earn my flight instructor certificate this semester. Wow, that was loud. Sorry. There you go. So congratulations, Craig. And he said, if you'd still like to come and speak with the Contrails Club at Liberty University this semester, I'm sure we can work something out. Yeah, I've just been so busy, Craig. I'm sorry. I hope to do that sometime in the future. So thanks for being patient with me. And let's see. Do we have time? How are we doing with time? 2 hours and 10 minutes so far. Okay, well, let's see. What am I going to do here? You know, I thought this was going to be a short show. Silly me. Oh, boy. What I'm going to do here, it's starting to get dark. I'm looking outside. It is almost 6 o'clock, and I'm going to go ahead and pause momentarily, as I am wont to do, and hopefully I'll finish this thing up tonight, as I usually say. But you know what normally happens. I'm finishing it up when I get home. But we'll see what happens. But at least I got most of the show completed. But to go here is some more feedback from Rick in Miami and Bruce. And oh no, I already read Bruce's. A couple pieces of feedback from Rick and from Lynn Francisco, from Kappa, from Nate in Brooklyn. And that should do it. So yeah, not a lot to go here. So stay tuned, and I'll be right back. Hey there, my video watchers, APG community members, possibly. As you can see, I'm at home in the studio, the home studio of the APG headquarters building, Studio 1A. Got a little bit late last night by the time I got back to the room, had a short night. A very early sign-in, 4:30 this morning, so I had to get up at 3:30. And needless to say, I decided that when I got back to the room that I would just go ahead and finish up the recording once I arrived home. I got home this morning, just one leg from Omaha to Atlanta. Had some business to do around the airport area for the nonprofit that I work for, or I'm a part of. I don't really work for. And so I was able to do that kind of thing, and then finally got home this afternoon, and here we are now, almost 7 o'clock on Thursday evening, the 15th of January. So looks like I'll be able to finish up the show right now and get this thing edited and ready to go for launch tomorrow, Friday, the 16th. So without further ado, let me get the audio recording going. Looks like we have a steady red light on the Zoom H5 audio recorder. And let's start with some audio feedback from Rick. So take it away, Rick.
Hello, Captain Jeff. How are you? It's Rick from Miami. I am currently on a layover here in Santiago, Chile. It's a beautiful day, sunny. I'm sitting in the old town. I mean, you can call it the old town part of downtown, I guess. There's a beautiful cathedral here. Just people walking by, minding their business, and I'm just sitting here, people watching. And I was listening to episode 149 while having a cold beer here. And particularly, I wanted to fill in some blanks there concerning Sport Pilot Dave's question about the use of anti-ice and how does that work. And basically, he had 5 questions. The first one was a reason why a pilot would not turn on all available anti-ice equipment. And yes, there's a reason why you wouldn't turn on all anti-ice equipment. The reason is, well, basically, as you said on your response, icing is basically what happens when, the conditions are such that ice is able to adhere itself, or water is able to adhere itself to the aircraft structure, and then accrue and build up, and then eventually change the shape of the airfoil and add weight to the airplane, and that could end up in a very, very bad situation. So what we do is turn on the anti systems on the airplane and then try to prevent that from happening. But there are times when we don't turn on the anti equipment, and I can think of what the flight crew training manual says on the airplane that I fly, and on the 767. I remember it said just about the same. You should turn on the anti-ice equipment when the temperature is between 10 degrees Celsius and all the way down to 40 below Celsius, and you have visible moisture. If the temperature is above 10 or below minus 40, then you should not turn on the anti-ice system. And the reason behind that is because if you turn on the anti-ice system at temperatures that are outside that margin, then what you're doing is you're actually heating up the surface that needs to be de-iced, or that would otherwise be de-iced within that margin. And by heating it up, you're making it more prone for water to adhere to that surface and then freeze onto the surface. So, for example, and this happens all the time flying through the intertropical convergence zone, we'll be at, the temperature will go from, you'll start flying at temperatures that are below 40 degrees Celsius, somewhere in the low 30s. And I can't think, I can't remember off the top of my head now, but maybe about above 33, 34,000 feet. I know certainly 35,000 feet and up, you're definitely below 40 degrees, negative 40 degrees Celsius. So if you turn on the anti-ice while flying through visible moisture at that altitude, then what you're doing is if you don't turn on the anti-ice, the surface itself is so cold that water is unable to cling to that surface, because of the temperature of the surface. The surface is cold, so no water can adhere to it. If you turn the anti-ice on, then you're heating the surface up, and then all of a sudden, whatever water is around you is able to initially, well, maybe not melt, but the surface is able to receive the water, and then that water is able to cling on that surface and then freeze, and then you start getting icing in a situation where you wouldn't otherwise have gotten icing. So that's an instance where I can think that you wouldn't turn on your anti-ice equipment. Let me see here. The second question is there a downside to the use of some of the equipment? Well, and then I think that goes along with question number 4, because question number 4 is there a trade-off as there is with carb heating? Yeah, there is a downside, and as you said, the downside to all of this is that on transport category airplanes, except for the 787, which I've never flown, all of the air that is used to operate the anti-ice devices on the airplane is, as you said, tapped from the engines. What does it mean to tap air from the engines? Well, on the front side of the engine, you have what's called the compressor, and then this air, as it comes in through the engine, before it gets to the combustion chamber, is passed through a low-speed compressor and then a high-speed compressor, and then all the air is tapped from that high-speed compressor. And as you compress air, the fact that you're compressing that air, you're making it very, very tight. Air molecules are rubbing closer together and very, very fast, and that heats air up. And then that high-energy air, some of the air that would go on to the combustion chamber and then get mixed with fuel and then ignited and then pushed out the back through the turbine, some of that air, before it gets to the combustion chamber, is actually channeled off and is used to it's channeled off through some, it's just a network of ducts and tubings that go out through the outer slats on the airplane. At least the airplane that I fly, the 777, and I remember the 767. Only the outer group of slats are heated, and then obviously the inlet for the engine is heated. Well, the next time I do a walk around, I'll make sure to take pictures of the actual exhaust ports where the air where the air leaves the inlet of the engine, and then the exhaust ports where the hot air leaves the slats. I'll make sure to take pictures of that. So that air is ducted, and then that very, very hot air is pumped through all those areas, and then it heats the area up, and whatever ice is there, it melts away, and then the forward speed of the airplane makes that ice fall. So since you are basically using air that would otherwise have gone straight through the engine to provide you power, not all that air is going through the engine. You're using some of that air to de-ice the airplane. Yeah, absolutely. There is a trade-off in power, and there was an accident, and it was actually a Mad Dog. It was an MD-82 back in 2005 that crashed because the pilots mistook the fact that they were cruising at 33,000 feet, and the plane was very, very heavy. It was actually overloaded, and then based on all the data and all the graphs and all that stuff, based on the weight that they had, and the fact that they had the anti-ice system on, the maximum altitude that they could cruise was only 31,900 feet. They were up at 33,000 feet. So what's going to happen? Obviously, the speed's going to start bleeding. The autopilot was on at that moment. The flight attendant came into the flight deck, checking up on the guys, wondering if they wanted coffee or any of that stuff. And then they both turned around, and all of a sudden, this airspeed keeps bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. Autopilot keeps trimming nose up, and then all of a sudden they stalled. And then the captain, he actually mistook the incident as a dual-engine stall. The first officer, he knew what was going on. He knew it was a stall, and then they just failure to communicate, and then they dropped from 33,000 feet all the way down to the ground, and then everybody was lost. I'm also attaching a link to that article. Concern about adequate electric current. In transport category airplanes, there really isn't a concern about adequate electric current because, as I said, and as Captain Jeff said, the system works mainly off of bleed air. And the last question was, is any of the anti-ice equipment automated? Yes, it is. On the airplane that I fly now, the 777, both the wing anti-ice and the engine anti-ice are automated. So there's an ice sensor that as soon as the sensor ice is over, the system will start working automatically. However, there's been many instances when I've flown through icing conditions, and there's visible moisture out there. I am in that range, below 10 degrees Celsius and above negative 40 degrees Celsius, and I haven't seen the anti-ice system turn on automatically. Well, obviously that means that the sensor's not picking up ice, but in the plane that I fly, when you turn on the anti-ice, you're not only turning on the anti-ice system, but you're also turning on the engine's continuous ignition. You have to remember that jet engines are basically the engines don't have igniters. Well, they do have igniters, but once the igniters are only used to get the engine going. Once you have a jet engine going, once it's got, combustion is going, the nature of the fuel, Jet A1, Jet A fuel, it's a fuel that runs on heat. So once you have that engine going, it's basically self-sustains combustion, and then as air is drawn through the compressors, through the combustion chamber, and out through the turbine, that cycle is self-sustaining. And the cycle, basically, all it needs is a smooth flow of air through the engine. Now, if there's icing present, then the very fact that there's icing, you might get some icing through the engine, some very, very cold water through the engine. And then the way to keep the engine from shutting down is by turning on the igniters and igniting the fuel as it is mixed with the air in the combustion chamber, which is something that's not required, as I said, during normal jet operations, normal engine operations. So when you turn on the anti-ice, the engine anti-ice, then you're also turning on the ignition system, what's called continuous ignition. There's other instances when the igniters are turned on. For example, when you are using on the takeoff and the landing portion of the flights, when the flap handle is out of the up position, so you're using flaps. Then, along with putting the flaps down, either for takeoff or landing, then you're also turning on the ignition system to make sure that the engine combustion is going on those critical phases of flight. So that's my 2 cents on that. Captain Jeff, thank you again for another great show. I haven't gotten to 150 yet. It's been a crazy couple of days. I've been flying nonstop. I'm off to Panama tomorrow, back to Miami for 2 days, and then back over to the cold part of the world now. Northern Europe, I'll be in the usual places. Holland, I'll go to Germany, I'll be in Switzerland, and I believe I have a stopover in France. I'm not sure about that, though. That might change. That's it from here. Thanks again for another great show. Keep them coming. God bless. And we'll talk to you again very, very soon.
In fact, so soon that you'll hardly notice that he even stopped talking.
Hey, Captain Jeff, how are you? Rick from Miami once again. And I'm still in Santiago, still on layover, and I'm having some sushi for lunch because I got pretty hungry, so I figured I'd stop over and have some sushi. I started on episode 150, and I was listening to the feedback related to what would the perfect cockpit layout be as far as combining Boeing and Airbus philosophies to make the flight deck a safer place. Well, yeah, I mean, I've only flown Boeing models in my airline career, and I'll tell you, I mean, it's really nice to see what the automatic flight director system and the autopilot is doing through the backdrive actuator. So, you know, a right turn or a left turn is commanded, and you see the yoke moving right and left. If a climber descent is commanded, you don't really see it. The yoke moves back and forth because all that stuff is commanded through the stabilizer system. And then obviously, changes are backdrive levels.
Uh-oh.
All the way from takeoff to landing. Well, not from takeoff, because, you know, on takeoff you'll go to either toga or flex, and then at climb thrust you'll, you know, bring the throttles back to climb, and then they're stuck there for the remainder of the flight. And here's my sushi. Thank you. Gracias. All right. And so I don't know. I mean, it makes me kind of uneasy to comment on this because, okay, I mean, you're an airline pilot. You've been doing this for, you know, 25, 30 years. I've been doing this for about 10 years, you know, and the guys that have been flying airliners have been doing this for a long time. And I know we all started out somewhere. We all had, you know, 100 hours on an airliner sometime. But to get to that point, you know, you need to know what you're doing. You can't rely solely on the aircraft's automation to get you safely from point A to point B. You need to know what your cruise altitude and your cruise airspeed is based on your pitch angle and your power setting. As you said, I don't care if it's a 707 or an Airbus 380. You need to know that for this pitch, I need this much power to give me this kind of performance. And if you can't figure that out, and what are you doing up front, you know, in command of an airliner? That is all I have to say about that. Yeah, I really don't know what else to say. That's it from Santiago. Once again, I hope you're doing great, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick, for both pieces of feedback. It's always good to hear from you and hear the ambiance in the background, etc. Great points made regarding the engine/airfoil anti-icing systems, especially on the airplanes that you have flown, and also the feedback on the perfect cockpit design. And I agree with your last statement. If you don't know pitch and power settings for the airplane you fly, I mean, and you're relying so much on the autoflight system, you know, what are you doing in that cockpit? You know, I agree.
I have very little patience for stupidity.
Don't we all? Okay. Thanks again, Rick. Look forward to hearing from you again in the future. Hope you're having a great time in Europe right now. It's the 15th. You sent this on the 12th, so I'm surmising that that's where you are right now. So let's see. Let's continue with Miss Lynn Francisco, who is a friend of mine from the StarQuest Production Network world, and she writes in, "Hi Jeff, here's an interesting article about the perception of taste whilst traveling in a plane. If you've ever wondered why food tastes bland on a plane, perhaps this article might give you some answers." And she gives me the link, and it's from BBC Future. Why does food taste different on planes? If you think that the food airline companies serve up as bland or unappetizing, it's not necessarily their fault. Essentially, you leave your normal sense of taste behind at the airport departure gate. Get on board a plane and cruise to a level of thousands of feet, and the flavor of everything from a pasta dish to a mouthful of wine becomes manipulated in a whole host of ways that we are only beginning to understand. Taste buds and sense of smell are the first things to go at 30,000 feet, says Russ Brown, Director of In-Flight Dining and Retail at American Airlines. Flavor is a combination of both, and our perception of saltiness and sweetness drop when inside a pressurized cabin. Everything that makes up the in-flight experience, it turns out, affects how your food tastes. Food and drink really do taste different in the air compared to on the ground, says Charles Spence, professor of experimental psychology at Oxford University. There are several reasons for this: a lack of humidity, lower air pressure, and the background noise. So when you step on an airplane, the atmosphere inside the cabin affects your sense of smell first. Then, as the plane gets higher, the air pressure drops, while humidity levels in the cabin plummet. At about 30,000 feet, humidity is less than 12%, drier than most deserts here on Earth. The combination of dryness and low pressure reduces the sensitivity of your taste buds to sweet and salty foods by around 30%, according to a 2010 study. To investigate this, researchers used a special lab that reduced air pressure, simulating cruising at 35,000 feet, which is 10.6 kilometers, as well as sucking the moisture out of the air and simulating the engine noise. They even made the seats vibrate in an attempt to mimic an in-flight meal experience. Interestingly, the study found that we take leave of our sweet and salty senses only. Sour, bitter, and spicy flavors are almost unaffected. I didn't know that. But it's not just about our taste buds. Up to 80% of what people think is taste is in fact smell. And we know that by, if we hold our noses and you eat something, you can't really taste it. We need evaporating nasal mucus to smell. Nice. But in that parched cabin air, our odor receptors do not work properly, and the effect is that this makes food taste twice as bland. So airlines have to give in-flight food an extra kick by salting and spicing it up much more than a restaurant on the ground ever would. And so the article goes on talking about how your taste buds are affected and your smell is affected. And one thing I didn't know, though, is the effect of noise and how that affects our perception of taste and smell. So if you want to read more of this article, well done by BBC Future, please see the show notes, and you'll find the link there. Thank you, Lynn Francisco, for forwarding that article. Kappa writes, just listen to an old captain's log, he said he just listened to an old captain's log, and I heard you calling dry ice dangerous goods. How so? Excuse me. That's dangerous. I would have expected dry ice to be a beneficiary goods due to its innate ability to put out a fire. It isn't pressurized either, not that that's much of a concern due to the fact that you already carry more than 6 pounds of pressurized carbon dioxide in the galleys. So this doesn't make sense to me. Perhaps you can clarify it for me. As always, keep Bernoulli wrapped around your wings. Kappa. And so I did a little bit of research and found that both the Department of Transportation, the DOT here in the States, and the International Air Transport Association, IATA, regulate shipments of dry ice as it is considered a hazardous material because of the potential for asphyxiation. Dry ice, which is carbon dioxide solid, when offered for transportation that could or will involve air, must be in packaging designed and constructed to permit the release of carbon dioxide gas and to prevent a buildup of pressure that could cause rupture of the package. And I think that one of the reasons why we kind of classify it as a dangerous good is that we want to make sure that we know when we're carrying it, because if it's placed in the wrong cargo compartment and put in the same cargo compartment as perhaps animals, because of the CO2 and the possibility for asphyxiation, it could be dangerous, not necessarily to the passengers, but to the animals that are carried in those particular cargo areas. So that's my best guess why it's considered, because it's not, as you said, it's not an explosive, flammable kind of a dangerous good. It's not radiation, and yeah, we expel CO2 ourselves, right? But that's the reason, I believe, for the possibility of asphyxiation. So that's the best I can do with that, Kappa. From Nate in Brooklyn. He said, I just sent you some audio feedback, and I thought I'd shoot you over to the link to the video I was speaking about. Okay, so he has a link. So we're going to hear about him talk about something in his audio feedback. So let's listen.
Hey, Captain Jeff. It is Nick from Brooklyn. I had been wanting to give you more audio feedback ever since you were reading my email feedback on your show before the new year, and said, no, don't send me any more email feedback. Send me audio feedback. So, of course, I was raring to go to give you guys a call, but really wanted to wait until I had something to ask about that would be beneficial to listeners of the podcast, because it's not my personal radio segment on your show. Anyway, I'm also using the voicemail for this and not the speak pipe. So if I really go astray, I'll just say, like, take two, and maybe you can start from that spot in the editing. Okay, so my question is about the Concorde crash. And I may have mentioned that even though I'm not a pilot, one of my entry points to being an airplane geek is the show Air Crash Investigation, which I think is just awesome. It's kind of like CSI meets Aviation, which is just a wonderful sweet spot for me. But the episode about the Concorde crash recently aired, and that's obviously a pretty famous crash. But let me boil this down to a question for you, and maybe other members of the community who might have studied the crash extensively. So, a little bit of background. The Concorde crash happened at Charles de Gaulle when, during a takeoff roll, the Concorde hit a piece of debris from a Continental Airlines DC-10. It was some kind of a corrosion strip from an engine nacelle, this tiny little strip of metal, and it blew one of Concorde's gigantic reinforced tires, which I guess have to be inflated to just gargantuan proportions to absorb the weight and the forces on them during the takeoff and landing, which, because of the speed the Concorde traveled at and because of the lift characteristics of that delta wing, exert even more forces on those landing gear than a conventional jet aircraft would. But this tiny strip of metal burst the tire, sending a 2-kilo chunk of tire up, impacting the fuel tank, which caused a shock wave, which caused the fuel tank to burst open. The rest is history. It was extremely tragic to watch. Like, I'm still emotionally reeling from it a little bit. But my question is, those guys had no chance to abort that takeoff roll. And if they reconstructed the cockpit voice recorder faithfully, it seems like V1 in the Concorde happens a long time before VR. And I actually got into a debate in the comments about the video with somebody. I'm like, does this make anybody else?
Oh, let's see. I think that the voicemail ran out, so let's hear the second part here.
So I love it when voicemails even let me know that I'm long-winded. Feel free to edit this for link or disregard it entirely and just send me an email. Sorry, that was too long. Anyway, the Concorde seems like it really had a fatal flaw, where if you have an engine issue between V1 and VR, you're kind of doomed. When I think about this, the Concorde had lost 50% of its thrust because of the leak, and because of the low lift characteristics of that delta wing, it really didn't have a margin for error. I was thinking about the fact that in a 787, 37, 57, in a Mad Dog, and pretty much any other modern jetliner, if you have an engine out during a takeoff roll after V1, yeah, it's a high workload situation, but it's no big deal. You guys train for that all the time. Those Concorde folks had no recourse. So my question is, was the Concorde basically a fatally flawed airplane that had no fail-safe for an engine out post V1 scenario, and were they just getting lucky all those other times? So this is a question for you and for the rest of the APG community. Sorry for being long-winded. Really enjoy your show. And, yeah, clear skies, happy tailwinds, take care, and God bless. Bye-bye.
I love happy tailwinds. Thank you, Nate. And no, your voicemail wasn't too long at all, and it wasn't. It's not my deal that voicemail line that you used, which clearly is not as good quality as the SpeakPipe version of your feedback. But it's an arbitrarily 3-minute time limit, I guess, that Google Voice puts on its service. And if I could make it longer, I certainly would. It's not me. It's the Googles. So, anywho, thanks for your feedback. And so I looked at the link that you provide. Actually, no, I went to a different link. I have not looked at the YouTube video link that you sent, but I'll have that in the show notes. But as you were talking about this crash, the only fatal crash of Concorde, I went to Wikipedia and did a search for the Air France flight 4590, which is this fatal Concorde crash. And I want to read this particular segment because it deals directly with your question. During the Concorde's subsequent takeoff run, this piece of debris still lying on the runway, that piece of debris from a Continental Airlines DC-10, a wear strip from one of the engines, 17.1 inches long, 1.1 to 1.3 inches wide, and about 0.055 inches or 1.4 millimeters thick, was on the runway, and that's what Concorde ran over this piece of debris, cut a tire, rupturing it, and a large chunk of tire debris, 4.5 kilograms or 9.9 pounds, struck the underside of the aircraft's wing at an estimated speed of 140 meters per second, 310 miles per hour. Although it did not directly puncture any of the fuel tanks, it sent out a pressure shock wave that ruptured the number 5 fuel tank at the weakest point, just above the undercarriage. Leaking fuel gushing out from the bottom of the wing was most likely ignited by an electric arc in the landing gear bay or through contact with severed electrical cables. At the point of ignition, engines 1 and 2 both surged and lost all power, but engine 1 slowly recovered over the next few seconds. A large plume of flame developed. The flight engineer then shut down engine 2 in response to a fire warning and the captain's command. Air traffic controller Gilles Lagelin noticed the flames before the Concorde was airborne. However, with only 2 kilometers of runway remaining and traveling at a speed of 328 kilometers per hour, its only option was to take off. The Concorde would have needed at least 3 kilometers of runway to abort safely. So, having passed V1 speed, the decision speed, the crew continued the takeoff, but the plane did not gain enough airspeed with the 3 remaining engines because the severed electrical cables prevented the retraction of the undercarriage. So the aircraft was unable to climb or accelerate, maintaining a speed of 200 knots at an altitude of 200 feet. The fire caused damage to the port wing, which began to disintegrate, melted by the extremely high temperatures. Engine 1 surged again, but this time failed to recover. Due to the asymmetric thrust, the starboard wing lifted, banking the aircraft to over 100 degrees. The crew reduced the power on engines 3 and 4 in an attempt to level the aircraft, but with falling airspeed, they lost control and the aircraft stalled, crashing into the Hotelissimo Le Relais Bleu Hotel near the airport. I probably butchered that up. Sorry, French-speaking people out there. So, basically, your question is saying, is this a fatally flawed airplane? Because between V1 and VR, V1 being the decision speed, VR the rotation speed, there is a long or a big gap there, and if you lose an engine, it sounds like your history. Well, no, it was certified to lose one engine, and if you're above that decision speed, that you can continue and safely continue the takeoff. Of course, what they are counting on is the fact that you're able to retract the landing gear and take all that drag away. So with the landing gear retracted, you will still be able to fly that airplane with one engine out. But as we just heard, not only was the engine out, but They also lost the capability or ability to retract the landing gear, which was an incredible amount of drag. And then the number 1 engine started surging again, and then it failed. So now you have both 1 and 2, both the engines on the left side of the airplane have failed. You have 3 and 4, and because the wing is disintegrating because of the heat of the fire, there was no way to control the airplane. And so in an attempt to gain control and reducing the power on the remaining operating engines, they just lost speed and stalled and crashed. Excuse me. So, yeah, so my answer is no, it wasn't a fatally flawed airplane. I'm sure that people out there listening, or I doubt anybody that flew Concorde is actually listening to my show, but if you are, you would probably say, yes, Captain Jeff, we practiced this V1 cut maneuver in the simulator all the time, as we do in all of our airlines and all of our airplanes. And the certifying agencies, have to prove that the airplane can do it. So now, how would not being able to retract landing gear in a modern, present day airplane, how would that affect the outcome? I don't think it would have as dramatic an effect as it did with Concorde, but I'm sure it would have some effect. Again, you want to get that drag decreased as quickly as you can so that you have a fighting chance to keep the airplane flying and accelerating, because speed is life. So thanks again. I hope that helped with the answer. And if anybody else has anything to say about that and add their 2 cents. And if you're listening out there, you flew Concorde, please send in some feedback. That would be awesome. All right. And let's see. Do we want to continue? Let's see. Okay. Kappa again writes, Jolanchou, Captain. I'm not sure if that's French or not. The ruddy nutcase sends another feedback, this time a bit about your soundscape problems, or claim to such. In a previous podcast, you mentioned that you used to sing in the choir. As such, you may want to record your own version of the Java Jive, getting YouTube off your back and perhaps even a few bucks on iTunes if you dare release it. Okay, I dare you to release it if you record it. Making your own recording will make you the copyright holder of that version of the Java Jive, giving you the opportunity to freely challenge any claims of copyright violation. Well, I don't think it's as simple as that, actually. I think that even if I recorded my own version of Java Jive, I would have had to secure the copyright, the rights to use that music, that composition. So even if I didn't play any recorded version of Java Jive, just by singing it without getting permission from the creators of the music and the words, I think I would be violating another type of copyright. So unfortunately, I still can't. Just like singing Happy Birthday, if you don't play a recorded version of Happy Birthday to You and you sing it, that technically is a violation of copyright. And I forgot who. Is it Time Warner that owns that copyright now? I think they bought it from whoever the original copyright holder was. But anyway, so if I sang Happy Birthday to You, and you know the rest, technically somebody can come to me and say, hey, you owe us $5 for doing that on your show, or whatever the going rate would be. So anyway, good idea though, Kappa. Good idea. As for the feedback bumper, I think we prefer Worf, unless you want to replace him with someone making the statement in Klingon. And then he writes something in Klingon. I cannot pronounce it. Let's see if this will help. Okay. Again? Okay. I think that was actually Kappa recording that. So thank you. You speak Klingon. That's pretty awesome. And then here's a word that I cannot pronounce. Qardh. I guess that's Klingon again. Klord. And as always, keep Bernoulli wrapped around your wings, Kappa. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Kappa. And look forward to hearing from you again in the future. And finally, we're going to end with Mr. Tom Seagraves, who I thought I'd played this piece of feedback earlier in the show, and I had not. So let's hear what Tom has to say.
Hello, Captain Jeff. Tom from Columbia, Missouri. I'd like to say hello to you again, and thank you again for your podcast.
You're welcome.
I have a couple of things I want to throw at you for feedback. The first thing is you've been reading a book about the Air France flight that crashed in the Atlantic, and I know you've shared the title with us before, but if you could do that again, I would appreciate it. I can't seem to find exactly the one you're reading, and I'd like to take a look at that book. The other thing, I came across a book on Amazon, and I just read it, and a very good book. It's called 35 Miles from Shore, The Ditching and Rescue of ALM Flight 980. And this is an accident of a DC-9 that happened back in May in 1970, and it was a flight from JFK to Saint Martin in the Caribbean. And it had 57 passengers, and that flight in a DC-9 was really stretching the limits of that airplane. And so anyway, by the time they got to St. Martin, there was weather issues, and they ended up running out of fuel, and they had to ditch in the water, and several people survived and several people didn't. It's written by a guy by the name of Emilio Corsetti, and I thought he did a great job of writing the book, and I picked it up. It's free if you're on Kindle Unlimited. Otherwise, it's not that expensive to pick up. So I'm going to send you the link for that. It was a really, really good book, and a really good story of just a lot of bad decisions that were made by a lot of people, not just the flight crew, but people that were in the airline as well. So the other thing I want to share with you is you were talking on your last podcast about the AirAsia crash and, you know, what could have happened, and you as a professional pilot, you know, you don't want to Monday morning quarterback anything, and I appreciate that. We won't really know what happens until they get the black boxes, which I believe they've found as of today. I think I heard they got one of them out, but I don't know which one. But anyway, I found a blog post by Chris Mano. He's a 737 captain with American Airlines, and he writes a blog, and he just put a piece out a few days ago about the AirAsia crash, and he didn't go into details. You know, he didn't Monday morning quarterback the AirAsia crash, but what he did is he had a really good piece about flying the envelope. And me not being a pilot, when I read this thing, my first thought was, wow, I don't know if I ever want to fly in a plane again, because those guys sitting up front, especially in a storm, really need to know what's going on. And there is very little room for error. And I thought he did a great job of breaking that down in layman's terms for guys like me. So somebody may have already sent this to you, but I'm going to send it to you as well. And I thought it might be something everybody else would like to read. So there you have it. I hope you're doing well. And thanks again for your show. And I wish you clear skies as always. Talk to you later.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you for those suggestions. And by the way, yes, I'll start with the last thing that you mentioned, Chris Mano's Jethead blog and his article, his blog post, AirAsia Crash Raises Questions for Pilots. And it's a great article. I'll include that in the show notes. Everybody should read it. He did a very good job explaining that whole situation and how, you know, the higher you go, the thinner the air, the margin between, going too fast and going too slow ends up narrowing quite a bit until you get into a situation where some people refer to it as the coffin corner, that the safe flying speed is such a small region that you have to be very careful. And most of us don't ever want to get close to that. So that's why, for me, when I'm flying and we're in turbulence and we're in bad weather and that kind of thing, my instinct is always to go down, get into lower, go to a lower altitude, get into thicker air, and where those margins start increasing. So if you have wild airspeed fluctuations, etc., you're not hitting the high speed or the low speed limits of safe flight. But again, check out this article. Chris Mano did a really nice job with the book, 35 Miles from Shore. Let me get the title right. 35 Miles from Shore, The Ditching and Rescue of ALM Flight 980 is awesome. In fact, I'm reading it from my Kindle on my MacBook Pro, and I have it on my iPad and some other places. And I started reading this based on your suggestion, bought it. I'm not a member of Kindle Unlimited, so I think it was like under $8, the Kindle version, and it is an awesome book. The author is a wonderful writer, and I didn't really know anything at all about this particular incident, this accident, this ditching that occurred back in, I think, 1970. And so I'm 63% of the way through. I just bought it like yesterday or the day before, based on your suggestion. And I love it. The link is in the show notes. Folks, you got to get this book. It's really good. And now, finally, the first question you asked, the book to which I was referring regarding the Air France 447 disaster, Understanding Air France 447 by Bill Palmer. Again, Understanding Air France 447 by Bill Palmer. And I'll have a link to the Amazon page in the show notes. Finally, we've reached the end of the show. It's probably more than 3 hours now. I do apologize to those of you who prefer the shorter shows. Now, if you're one of those many people who enjoy the longer shows, well, you should be very, very happy. And now I'm going to stop talking and tell you to go over to airlinepilotguy.com, where you'll find the show notes for this episode, other episodes with the show notes, of course. You'll find information about the Airline Pilot Guy Coffee Fund and the Airline Pilot Guy community. Join up and have some fun and get engaged there. Let's see what else. Other ways to listen to the show, watch the show. There's a video version there, a link to my YouTube channel. And if you're a YouTube watcher and you're heading over there to look at the show notes and you want to check out the audio-only version of it, and there's information on how to find me on iTunes, all that stuff is at airlinepilotguy.com. And until next episode next week, wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care and God bless.
Good day.